Queens, I got four of a kind on everything. I gotta live like a king. Hey, catch this rhythm. You feel that? That's called playerism. I'm on the scene, a player clean, poker face, four queens. I got four of a kind on everything. Diggers living elite. I don't feel complete without kicking at my feet in a Rolls Royce every week. Baby, this is deep. Listen close when I speak. I need to at least, cause I'm too much. I'd be a fool if I love him. You'll be a fool if you trust him. Here with my niggas, we keeping it gangsta. Yeah, I'm a slayer, I'm just keeping it player. I'm fucking her now, we're man eating it later. That's maybe why he is a hater. I'm wearing all black like I'm being a raider. You talk to police, we call you a traitor. I'm running the city, they call me for favors. I'm running the city, they call me the mayor. It's getting political with me, my street presidential, she give me the... Quit banging my line, ho. Quit banging my line, ho. When you see me act like you don't even know me, ho. When you see me act like you don't even know me, ho. Come on, baby, get a clue. How you do what you do? How do you fall in love with me, but I'm not in love with you? Peace to the saints! Peace to the saints! Peace to the saints. We back at it. Today we have a very critical topic. For some people seem to think we are on the brink of nuclear war. Today we're going to go through quite a bit of information with regards to what's actually going on, give some honest perspective. We'll also analyze some of what has been shared by the news outlets, primarily the Western news outlet, which we know tends to be a bit propaganda filled. And then at the end of it, I'm going to make my prediction as to how this conflict will end. I'll also speak of what superior strategy would have been. I think Vladimir Putin has not exercised the best strategy. I've been actually quite disappointed in him and underwhelmed from a perspective of military strategy. He might be really good at securing the internal power apparatus in Russia, as he's ruled for quite some time. And he did, of course, get training on that as a KGB officer, but that's comparable to, that's like the analog of the American FBI. So perhaps he did not get proper training on international warfare, or it's just not his forte, because I think he's done a pretty poor job at this. But still, he's going to win. And the important piece is that he has to win, because if he doesn't win, not only is he going to lose his job as dictator, well, he's also probably going to lose his life, because we observe a pattern that the Americans, once they kind of topple you, then they kill you. That's what the American government does. Yes, indeed. And that's financed by your tax dollar, in case you didn't know. You are financing bloodshed around the world. So I figured, I'm always looking to, upgrade, try out new things. So I'm pop on a new sticker here. Let us get started per our tradition by showing love to those who show love to us. And then we're going to get into this work. Lots of good information for you today.
And you can purchase that sticker. It is in the description.
Cool. That's a cool one.
Okay, we have Major Mind and Soul says, slightly on this topic. Today I read the chapter, How to Get Your Jaw Broken While Getting My Morning Sweat In. It brought me back. Also, I copped a few fire pieces from MDB Label. Thank you, sir. Peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints. Appreciate the support. And MDB Label is one of my favorite brands. And in fact, I was, a chick tried to spit some game at me, an employee at the airport, and I was dripping MDB Label. So, shout out to mdblabel.com.
It looks like you got the headband that you were wearing on the workout videos today.
Okay, yeah. I actually just got off of 20 hours of flying. You dig? South Africa is one of the farthest places away one can fly from the Western United States. I actually just got back from that and went straight to the gym.
And he got the floral athletic shorts.
Oh, really?
The Hustle Day shirt, and then the black and white tie-dye shirt.
I should have took my time putting this on. Shame on me. Yeah, I actually have all those pieces. Yeah. Except the Hustle Day shirt. I got to grab that one. That'd be a good addition to my workout wardrobe.
Andrew sent tuition.
Shout out to Andrew.
On Cash App, we have Javier said, peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints.
Carry on.
All right, saints. There are a lot of different folks weighing in on this, and strangely, I guess not strangely, predictably, you're getting essentially the same information. And that's why it's so important for me to engage you with this conversation. So let's really get into it. We're also going to look at a couple maps. And, I fell in love with maps as I was, coming to understand history and geopolitics. And so we're going to look at a couple maps today. It's critically important. But first, let's look at a piece of propaganda from the American press. This one is from the New York Times. It's actually quite comical how they're trying to set this up. Check this out. Here we go. So this one says maps tracking the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay, cool. So Ukrainian forces retreat from Soledar after months of fighting. Ukraine confirmed that its forces had withdrawn from Soledar, a small salt mining town in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine, after months of fierce artillery battles that have destroyed much of the town. Now, mind you, I want you all to remember, think of the size of the Russian population versus the Ukrainian population. And all you're going to see consistently in the Western press is that Ukraine is using their own soldiers and that Russia is using mercenaries. It would make you ask yourself, how is it possible that Russia has to use mercenaries and Ukraine doesn't? And Russia has superior population size and they have a dictator who's willing to send everyone forward into this effort. It doesn't make any sense. Certainly, not only is Ukraine using mercenaries, they're not even paying for their mercenaries. The United Kingdom, Germany, America, France, and the other former colonial powers are financing this. Oh, and they're also sending their own soldiers as well.
Okay, we have St. Flo's sent a cash app.
Shout
He
out to St.
said,
Flo's
"It costs to be a boss. Thank you."
in a real way.
And in his cash app picture, he's wearing one of the varsity jackets produced by one of the Saints.
In a real way. And those are some of the cleanest pieces we have. Clean, high quality pieces.
We have DeAndre said, "Looking forward to the game, Saint."
Yes, and there shall be much today.
Carry on.
Russian control of Soledar brings its forces closer to the city of Bakhmut, just 6 miles southwest, where one of the bloodiest battles of the war continues. Both sides have thrown masses of troops into the fight there for months, suffering heavy casualties. And you'll often notice that when they mention casualties, they'll give you the Russian number of casualties, but they rarely give you the number of Ukrainian casualties. Instead, what they'll do is they'll tell you a sad story. They'll tell you a story about a woman dying or a family being split apart or someone's parents dying, but the child survives and is now an orphan. And all of this is clearly a propaganda effort. And so I just want you to pay attention. They'll say something like, the Russians have lost 30,000 troops in one day. And the Ukrainians also had casualties. Here's little Vanessa, and her parents were killed in this bombing of this apartment building. They'll kind of do that to pull on your heartstrings.
Okay, we have Gabriel said, "Salute Marquette. Do you think that Putin will say bump that and hit the red button if he loses the war? By the way, I can't wait for the new album."
You know what? If he hits the red button, he didn't lose the war. You dig? And that would be something that he'd have to do before, he is in a position where he feels like he's going to lose. And I want to be very clear with you all that he's already failed on a number of fronts. Number one, when he tried to call this a special military operation, and then he put forward a meager amount of resources, be it personnel, heavy arms, he started off wrong. He learned absolutely nothing from military history, namely the Blitzkrieg strategy, which is what he should have been utilizing to make an example, especially knowing that he did not have many allies, especially not on the continent that he's connected to, which is Europe. And so he clearly didn't learn much from Hitler and Hitler's very effective beginning to World War II, because essentially he tried to do the same thing that Hitler did, which was Hitler essentially annexed a country. And then after he did that, he said, hey, that's it. I'm not going to do it again. I think in the Russian case, they wouldn't have annexed any other countries once they took over Ukraine. It would have been statement enough. And truth be told, the Russians have not been aggressive colonial powers. That's the Western Europeans that are the aggressive colonial powers. And we're talking about Portugal, Spain, France, Germany, the United Kingdom. Those are the colonial powers, the ones that show up on your territory uninvited, kill, sexually abuse the females, create mixed race kids, and then create basically an aristocracy of their race there in that country. Yeah, they created all of Latin America. They've done this to Australia. They're the ones who do that. The Russians, you can't go anywhere in this world really and find Russian speakers unless they're like bordering Russia.
Okay, we have Wax Keys said, "Hello, Marquette. I am new to this channel. I have been dating a girl for a year and a half, and I'm going to college in San Antonio, Texas, and she'll be in Houston. Should I maintain the long distance relationship?"
Thank you for that question. And everyone welcome him warmly. Never discard an asset. So if she's an asset, hold on to her. Have reasonable expectations, which is that she's probably not going to keep her word, especially if she's going into her freshman year and she has no experience as to what college is about. So she'll probably be doing some things that you don't condone and a number of things that she won't tell you about. But you can hold on to it. I highly advise that you carry on with your life, but know that she'll also probably be carrying on with her life. And if you can maintain it, fantastic. If it falls away, don't be hurt about it. And so I would not throw away something that appears to have value, but I would certainly adjust my mentality around the situation.
Okay, on Cash App, we have Keandre said, "Supporting the work, respect to Bridget and the Saint."
Shout out.
And we have Ron sent tuition.
Shout out to Ron. And thank you to those supporting the work. We really do appreciate it.
Carry on.
Yes, indeed. So here we are with the map. And maps are really important, especially if they're accurate. And notice I said if they are accurate. And we're going to look into that a little deeper because maps can tell us so much. And when you're a military strategist, the map is everything. And I know that Putin is not as much a boogeyman or a monster as he purports to be, because if he really was, he would have used the strategy that I've already mentioned before and that I'm going to detail again. He really is a lot softer than we expect, and it seems as though he really wants to be included in the international community, lest he would have taken the appropriate action to win this decisively and quickly. And truth be told, you want to win wars quickly. Germany, much smaller by land mass and probably at that time by population as well, than modern Russia, they were winning quickly. And that's the key. When you win quickly, you make an example and you also don't expend too much resources, and you're able to have a war economy that benefits you rather than a war economy that bleeds you. And right now, there's no doubt that the Russians are having a war economy that's bleeding them. And what they really want to do is win this war so that they can get to the rebuilding process, which is to say, for a couple of years, they'll be rebuked by the international community. They'll have to sell their goods on the black market. They'll sell natural gas and whatever else they got to sell on the black market, or they'll sell it to rogue states like Iran or North Korea, or states that pretend to be neutral like India, which is a mass market, and they'd be happy to buy these lower cost Russian goods. Now, if they're smart and they utilize the strategy that I'm going to identify, which they're utilizing it late, and it's really despicable, Putin really needs to hire you, boy, then they're basically going to suffer longer, which is to say, if they would have utilized this strategy that I'm about to identify, they would already have won the war. And right now they'd be in the period of time where the whole international community is looking at them like they're bad guys. And then we'd just be waiting and waiting for people to forget about it, and then for them to be reintegrated into the global economy because they're too big a player for the world to ignore for too long. Right. And also with the strategy that I'm going to identify, I'm going to not only identify what should be done militarily, but also what should be done on the propaganda front, because anytime something happens in the world, you have to be prepared for it mentally. So your government is always going to prepare you, the citizen or the viewer or the consumer. They're going to prepare you mentally for what they're about to do. That's why you see all this information online, hashtag stand with Ukraine, all this nonsense that's the government preparing you to support Ukraine. And truth be told, most of you don't know where Ukraine is on a map. Most of you have never met a Ukrainian person in real life. You don't have any Ukrainian friends. You've never been to Ukraine. You have no real connection with Ukraine. So there's no logical reason to care about Ukraine any more than you care about Central African Republic, any more than you care about Namibia, any more than you care about those kids who are currently dying in Syria. You don't care, right? So why do all of a sudden we care about Ukraine? We don't. The government's preparing you with tremendous amounts of propaganda, as was said in the comments. Yes, hearts and minds. So anyways, what you see here is a bit of an old-fashioned war when you look at this map. And I really don't like old-fashioned wars. I also don't like non-strategic wars. So take a look here. This is the problem. You see that Russia is essentially on the pink side, right? Which is that they're moving from the east to the west, which is to say from Russian territory, pretty much marching in a traditional way eastward, capturing land which was formerly occupied, or shall we say controlled or administered by the Ukrainians. And then you see the dark yellow. This is the contested areas. Now, this is very traditional and this is very bad military strategy. I'll tell you why it's terrible military strategy. This is atrocious military strategy because it shows that Putin's not serious about his word. First, and it also shows he's does not understand the big picture and he's not aggressive enough. When you're extremely aggressive, the United States would have been scared to even get involved. The West has to really know that you will press the button. I'm going to give you an example of how he could have made this clear. Number one, it would have never been a special military operation. Go ahead.
We have MH said, peace to the saints. Welcome back, saints.
Thank you very much. Peace to the
And
saints.
on PayPal, we have Joshua came in. He said, these 3-a-days have been more like 4 or 5 lately. I can be a flirt by nature. I was opening a business account this morning and caught the Navy Federal rep slipping. I couldn't help myself. She sounded uber fine. And this is the Joshua.
On the phone? You think he did it? He must have did it on the phone.
This is the Joshua that was at the conference.
Oh, shout out to Joshua. Shout out to Joshua. Look, he had to have did it on the phone. He says she sound good. Must have been on the phone. It's a beautiful thing. So number one, it was a special military operation. It should not have been that. It should have been an outright war, but it would not be a war that you announce. It's a war that you start off with attack. And the attack should have been, the goal of it should have been the total annexation of Ukraine, the entire country. If Putin was serious and he was a real monster in the appropriate way that he should have been, he would have not went to take over some portion of Ukraine. He would have went for the entire country, which is to say to completely depose the leader and take over the entirety of the country, all of the people, all of the land, all of the resources, and include it in Russia. It would have basically been like step one in reestablishing the former Soviet Union, except that's all we would have taken. Right. But it would have put the whole world on notice that we're hyper aggressive. We're not asking anyone for permission and we're completely unpredictable. That would have been terrifying, because if he would have tried to annex Ukraine in its totality, people would have been shocked. Like, hold on, you said there's a Russian speaking portion along the eastern border, yet you took over the whole country for no discernible reason. And you would have been there like, as Putin, like, yeah, I did. Exactly. Don't play with me.
Justice said, peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints.
We have Walton just made a purchase on sassinbrand.com.
Shout out to Walton.
He got the Sassin or Nothing sweatshirt.
I actually got that one too. I'm about to floss it later today. I got another live. I don't even remember what the topic is, but I'm flossing it later today.
And he got the They Do Not Represent Us sweatshirt.
Ooh, that's a cold one. I need that one. I could have sworn I ordered. I gotta get that one ordered.
And then the shirt you have on now is also a new product.
Yes, indeed.
I just posted the link for that shirt
link
in the chat.
The description. This like the jersey. You heard me? Everybody need this one. And so understand this with regards to the annexation of Ukraine. Not only would I have annexed it through blitzkrieg style total war, then I would have said as Putin that I now consider Ukraine as a part of Russia. If anyone attempts to penetrate these new territorial borders, which I have established, I would consider that an attack on the Russian homeland, and you will be victim of nuclear war. And there will be no warning, for this is the warning, and the bomb will fall straight away. Play with me if you want to. Why is this a wise move? This is a wise move because, number one, and mind you, if you're saying, Marquette, this sounds fairly crazy. Well, if you track back through some of our greater minds like Henry Kissinger, you research things like the Mad Dog strategy. You'll understand this a little bit better. I'm putting it in simple and crude terms for you all. But understand this. You annex all of Ukraine. On paper, who are Ukraine's allies before the war started? Ukraine was not a part of NATO. Hence, NATO should not be involved in this. And technically, NATO's not involved. But we all know that NATO's pumping tremendous amounts of military training, aerial intelligence, weapons, spare parts, personnel. They're doing everything they can. And that's why Russia's struggling. Truth be told, Russia is way more equipped for warfare than Ukraine. If it was just a one-on-one fade, it was a one-on-one fair one, Ukraine would have lost a long time ago. War would have been over. What's happening is this is a proxy war. Russia is fighting America. They're fighting France. They're fighting the United Kingdom. They're fighting so many people. They're fighting an endless bank account. And that's why they're struggling. And if he was smart, he would have hit Ukraine super hard straight away with no warning, annexed the whole thing, said this is a part of the Russian motherland. And if you touch it, you will be nuked. And you do not have any right to touch it because this is not a part of NATO and this is not your ally. And that's completely true and reasonable. And I think he might have needed to nuke somebody. But truth be told, the Westerners are weak. Their leaders are cockroaches. They're feminine. Some of them are actually women. I'd say they're feminine. Some of them are actually women. And they're scary. So that's what I would have done. Then the other piece hit me.
Okay, we have Top Shelf said, "Peace to the saints, listening while at the gym. These strategic live streams are incredible."
Oh, and it's about to get more incredible too.
On Cash App, we have Jose said, "Peace to the saints. Love when you got your gold chains."
Yiddy.
And those can be purchased at sassinbrand.com. They're produced by one of the saints.
Are these still up?
They're
okay. For sure. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And we have Justin said, "Peace to the saints. Really enjoy these strategic lives."
And we're about to get deeper. Check this out. So you include Ukraine as a part of your territory now. Now Ukraine is Russia. Boom, full stop. Now, you might say, "Oh, Quet, that's wild." Yeah, kind of, not really. Here's the thing. If you don't annex all of Ukraine, now you have these countries that are on the border of Ukraine who are now causing you problems. Countries like Germany, countries like Poland, perhaps Hungary, which I'm surprised because Hungary and Poland are like some of the poor European countries. I don't even know why they're getting involved in this. They should have greater priorities. If I was Polish or Hungarian, I would be absolutely irate because both of those countries have fairly weak economies and those people are not experiencing a high quality of life. And I've been to both of those countries. I know this for a fact. I'm not talking about data I've read. Yeah, I've read the data, but also I've been there. They're not experiencing a high quality of life. I'd be angry if I were those countries. And if I was Poland, I'd be scared. I mean, you guys already got demolished during World War II. And y'all still talking about, when I was in Poland, they still talking about that. They still butthurt over that.
Okay, we have none of the above said tuition.
Shout out. Appreciate you. So when you annex all of Ukraine and you say this is now a part of Russia, what you've effectively done is you've closed all routes for weaponry and assistance being sent into Ukraine, which means the following tactic would have had to be executed. And let me just show you on a map really what I'm talking about. So here's a map from the U.S. Department of Defense. It's ironic that it's called Department of Defense when most of what they do is offensive. It's comical. Most of what they do is offensive. So, anyways, here's a map with Ukraine on it, right? So we know Belarus is an ally, right? Let me know if my mouse is showing up on the YouTube.
It is.
That's just on StreamYard. So someone in the chat, let me know if you can see my mouse on the screen. You probably can't, but if you can, fantastic. Anyways, Belarus is to the north of Ukraine. Belarus is let's say an ally of Russia or a neutral party, but they're not an enemy. They're not going to do anything crazy. That being the case, you don't really have to worry about that border. Then you have Poland to the west. Poland has already shown their colors. I always thought that Poland had decent government because they're fairly nationalistic, but they're clearly more liberal and foolish than I anticipated. So if you would have taken over all of Ukraine, then Poland would not have been able to send in any weaponry. You wouldn't have been able to route tanks or any significant heavy arms through Poland or Hungary, which also has direct access to Ukraine. And just side note, it's never a pleasant thing to have so many borders with so many different countries. Now, moreover, you're probably asking, well, Marquette, how precisely would you have done this? Well, instead of doing the idiotic thing that Putin has done, which is to take a direct and very traditional offensive coming straight from the Russian border and pushing westward, instead, I would have tried to utilize air attack and deployment of, troops from the air and really put obviously I would have preceded this with, strikes, with long range missile strikes across these borders and really did something unusual, which is to say, rather than fighting along the Russian border, I would have left the Russian border as is. And you might say, Marco, well, why do you leave the Russian border, unprotected, or why aren't you putting any troops on the Russian border? Because if I'm Putin and I'm actually an honest man of my word and I'm a real monster like I've claimed to be, if I say if anyone attacks Russian motherland, they will be hit with nuclear force, I would have left the Russian border completely unprotected. Completely. Why? Because if anyone crosses that border, even with a spitball, somebody sends a spitball over the Russian border, they're getting hit with a nuke. And the only group of people who would send a spitball over the Russian border would be the Ukrainians, whom we share a border with and whom we're attacking. That being the case, I don't need to protect the Russian border because low key, I want them, I dare them to send a spitball, sneeze, cough real hard over the Russian border. I want you to do that so that I can hit you with a nuke. Why? Because Ukraine cannot compete in nuclear warfare. Can you Google, does Ukraine have nuclear weapons? They can't compete in nuclear warfare. So I want them to do that so I can hit them with a nuke and then they're done.
Ukraine does not have nuclear weapons in its arsenal.
Period. They don't have nuclear weapons. So as soon as I hit them with a nuclear warhead, something small, you heard me, something lightweight, nothing crazy, just something small to kill enough people to where they're like, oh, okay, you're serious. So I would have left that border completely unmanned. I would have proceeded bombing all of the borders that Ukraine has with my enemies, my potential enemies, Poland and Hungary. I would have hit it serious. All those border towns inside of Ukraine, we'd have hit them real serious. Then we would have basically already went and took out the Ukrainian Air Force, which was meager, right? Pathetic. Would have take out their Air Force. Then we'll go ahead and parachute in a bunch of people. Yeah, and then we have all of our people populate those borders. We would have also been taking our people in through Belarus. Even if Belarus claims to be neutral, whether they are neutral, whether they're an ally or whatever, we'd have ran our troops through there, ran armies through there so that we can get through to those borders on the western side of Ukraine. And we'd have given Belarus a good alibi. We just had Belarus say that they're neutral. They didn't give us permission. They just didn't want war with Russia, which is probably true and easy to believe. And they could have said that they were under nuclear threat. Who knows? Who cares? But all the same, I'd have went through Belarus because it's quicker and easier. And it gives us the element of surprise. So then what you've done is you've secured tactical positions along the border of Poland, which you could have easily done through having a bombardment of those Ukrainian towns on the western seaboard, and then followed, heavy arms, long range arms hitting those towns, then followed up with ground troops coming in through Belarus, obviously that part of Belarus that's bordering Poland, and then just have them come in and go all the way through down to the Hungarian side. Now you've pretty much closed that off because Moldova is a very poor country, and I don't think they want the smoke. And Romania is also a poor country, and they don't want the smoke. And here's the thing. Once you do Ukraine super dirty like I'm describing, nobody wants the smoke. No one. And everyone's going to think twice because you're letting them know, like, hey, if anyone sends anything over our border, by anyone, we're talking about Ukraine, we're going to nuke them. And here's the thing. We still got enough room to nuke them because we have a big open area within the middle of Ukraine. Kiev would be a great place to nuke. We don't have troops there. It would just be us hitting only Ukrainians. And then we already have these borders sealed off so that the Western powers can't send in mercenaries, training, or weapons, or namely tanks, like heavy vehicles.
Okay, we have Trevor said, peace to the saints, paying what I owe. Thank you for keeping us updated.
In a real way, and we ain't even got into it yet. I'm just giving you a little taste of the strategy.
On Cash App, we have Ivan the Saint said tuition.
Shout out to Ivan.
And on PayPal, we have Linus said unrelated, but if a woman likes you, do you think being controlling and possessive will be seen as attractive?
No. Some women like a dominant man. If you're being dominant, then yeah, they'll enjoy that. That's generally like a sexual thing. Some women, if they're very submissive and they like to be under a dominant man, you don't have to be controlling and possessive. They're going to come, they're going to come to you and they're going to be obedient. They're going to submit. So you don't need to control and behave like that way. But generally speaking, that's not a good look.
Okay. We have OH sent tuition.
See, this guy writes, wouldn't nuking a U.S. ally cause nuclear war with the U.S. as well? That's why I only answer the ones who send super chats because. Oh, he did? Okay.
Not this time, but
okay. He's because Ukraine's not a U.S. ally. Like they're not in NATO. That's the important thing. Is are they in NATO? Are they in NATO? That's the key to understand. They're not actually a U.S. ally. The United States has been sending them money. They've been sending a lot of people money. So I think before the war popped off, they're probably sending them in the range of like 100 million to 250 million, something crazy, something like nonsensical.
It's a NATO partner country.
Yeah, these fake terms, right? You see how they're scamming? You see how they're scamming? It's like, are you in NATO or are you not in NATO? They're not in NATO. And one of the reasons that Putin took the initiative is because there was already a pre-existing agreement that they would not join NATO. And being that they start getting too close to the West, that's why Putin took this action. But he was playing small instead of playing big. He starts taking this little slither when really he should have said, you know what, we're annexing the whole country. We're annexing the whole country. We're taking out this Western puppet, and we're just going to control this. And they have practice. They've done this before. They used to have the Soviet Union. They get this. I don't know why he was so weak. That's what I would have done. I would have annexed the whole damn thing. But anyways, back to the core topic. So just to summarize what should have been done, step one, without saying anything to anyone, you launch attacks on Ukraine. You launch attacks on Kiev, ideally when you know that Zelensky's there. This is at the very beginning. Before this is how it would have started it. Blitzkrieg, hit Kiev, long-range weapons. And then after that, you declare war and let them know that they can submit now or they can be completely obliterated. This is full total war. We are going to annex the entire country. Either Kiev capitulates or we continue. And while I announced that, I would have already started bombing those cities in the West. And I also would have been having troops moving through Belarus, whether Belarus agreed or didn't agree. They might have been collateral damage because this is going to get done. And I would have took all those cities on that western flank of Ukraine. I would obviously aerial bombardment, took out the Air Force as well, and then started moving troops in by any means possible. Part of it, ground troops through Belarus, laying them along that Poland border as well as the Hungarian border, because we know those are the two countries most in bed with the West. This would have scared the living daylights out of Slovakia, Romania, and Moldova. They wouldn't have done a thing. You heard me? They just be praying that they don't get hit on accident. And low key, I might have sent something over the border just to, just to, keep them awake. Just to keep them awake, something accidental, just to keep them awake. And you might be saying, Marquette, that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. America did this. America's done this before. Yeah, check out Southeast Asia. I'm not going to get specific. If you're sharp, you already know what I'm talking about. Anyways, yeah, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Kissinger, Nixon, do your own research. Anyways, point is this. Then we would have gave him a little bit of time, and this would have been a much stronger position because it would have removed the opportunity of Zelensky if he survived the attack in Kiev, which he probably wouldn't have, because I would have been hyper targeting it to kill him in particular. If he somehow survived it magically, and my whole goal would have been to get him killed, but magically, if he survived it, then they'd be in a weak position because they know they have insufficient numbers, they have a weak economy, and they're isolated. And the reason that they're isolated is because I would have immediately let the West know that any intervention of any nature will result in nuclear warfare. And we will first give a demo of nuclear warfare in Ukraine so that you know we're serious. And then we will give an attack on one of you. So know that there will be 2 attacks. I'll promise 2 attacks. And the first one is just to let you know that we're serious. Now, here's the thing. If a nuclear attack hit Ukraine, that wouldn't mean that America needs to retaliate. It doesn't make sense because we didn't attack America. We didn't attack any of America's actual allies, not their fake pretend allies. We didn't attack any NATO partners. That's why NATO's there. We didn't attack NATO. The thing I want you guys to understand is, and then while I did this, I would have started pushing out propaganda in every possible way. And this is the propaganda message I would have pushed out to the West, to the citizens of America in particular, to let them know the reality, which is this. I would have kept pushing out, you do not want to die in nuclear war. You do not want to die in nuclear war for Ukraine. Would Ukrainians die in nuclear war for you? Those would have been the 3 messages. It would have been tiered. You don't want to die in nuclear war. You don't want to die in nuclear war for Ukraine, which has nothing to do with you. And would Ukrainians die in nuclear war for you? And it would have resonated because you know what? Fear is powerful. And Americans would be like, I don't want to die. I'd have been scaring everybody, scaring the kids. People would have been making bomb shelters. Putin's crazy. I'd have been terrifying everybody. That would have been the message I would have put out. Do you want to die in a nuclear war that doesn't have to happen? Do you want to die in a nuclear war that doesn't have to happen? Ukraine is right next door to Russia. It's ours. Huh?
Okay, we have JoJo Thoughts said, peace to the saints. Twisted my knee pretty bad while boxing. Any tips on recovering?
Wow. That's a curious, knee injuries generally are occurring in baseball, basketball. It's unusual. I know some people have had the Achilles go out in boxing. I'm sorry to hear that. Number one, go to an expert, a doctor. They'll recommend physical therapy, and if there's no surgery to be done, they'll recommend physical therapy. Actually do it, and actually take time off. And if they give you medicines for inflammation, actually take them. I don't even like taking medication, but I'd failed to do that one time because I don't like medication. It did not help things at all. And stick religiously with the recovery regimen that they give you.
Carry on.
All right. So once I did that, I would have been really, I would have, overpopulated troops on that western flank of Ukraine. I would have had the Russian border naked in the hopes that they attacked. And then if they attacked Russia, that would have just given me an excuse to use nuclear warfare, which would have preserved my economy. And it would also have preserved a lot of weapons of war, and it would have preserved a lot of Russian lives. And if you want to think back to, other situations, think back to why the Americans use nuclear war. Pretty much for those same reasons. And also they wanted to test it out. Let's be honest. They wanted to test it out. They wanted to be the first to do it. And they did it and got away with it. And no one condemned them, even though it was unnecessary. Did it on little old Japan. Carrying on. Here we are back here. So that's what Marquette would have done. And I could have executed that fairly quickly, preserved the Russian economy, and also, gained a whole new country under the belt. And then 10 years later, we would have been reintegrated into the international community, and the Russians would have thought I was the greatest leader ever. And then we would have been much stronger for some future aggressions, which I wouldn't have enacted. But, maybe the person who came in after me could have taken over more land. Next thing you know, we'd have reestablished the Soviet Union because Westerners are weak anyways. Pop this back up and let's hear some more on the propaganda front. So this is the terrible strategy, the very traditional strategy that Putin is currently using, moving, troops in a very predictable way. This guy is no Napoleon Bonaparte, that's for sure. Soledar is Russia's first notable victory since its grinding gains in eastern Ukraine over the summer. In fall, Ukraine executed a string of successful counteroffensives. Notice it's like they try to make everything sound like so bad for Russia, even though Russia is still actually winning this conflict. I want to be very clear with anyone who's ever observed war. Know that when you're fighting on the territory of the other country, you're winning. Yeah, in case you didn't know, if you're fighting a war and it's like Russia versus Ukraine and you're fighting on Ukrainian land, you're winning. Okay. Don't let us never get confused on that part. It's all propaganda to suggest that Russia's losing. Russia's country hasn't even been attacked. It's all propaganda. And just a side note for the sick leftists, I want you all to understand these people are complete liars when they talk about the climate crisis, climate change, emissions, CO2, and all this other stuff. Ask yourself, how much gas is used in a war? How many bad chemicals are released into the atmosphere during explosions? Yet the West is the number one entity stoking the war. War would have been over if the West didn't get involved. It's not their business. In the fall, Ukraine executed a string of successful counteroffensives, retaking vast swaths of the northeastern Ukraine and the majority of ground in the south. In November. Oh, we're talking about November? That's strange because I just looked at this article and I was looking for a new article. And as you can see here, this article says January 25th, 2023. So this is supposed to be from January 25th, 2023. So understand how the propaganda goes. When they don't have a good narrative to tell you, they make a whole new article in the new year, January 25th, 2023, yet they have to go all the way back to November just so that they can reference something that Russia is doing correctly. It should be something that Ukraine is doing successfully. Notice that. That's called propaganda. Here's another piece of propaganda technique that they're utilizing on us. They know that you're going to scroll down, right? You're reading this article. Oh, it's ultra short. Why is it so short? Because it's talking about Russian advancement. Oh, and now we have another article. And this one says Ukraine has reclaimed more than half of its territory. Wow. So then you're like, whoa, Ukraine's doing really well, until you figure out this article is from November 2022. What? So you got three-month-old articles? You're trying to show us 3-month-old articles, and this is called a news outlet, but it's telling us what's not new.
Here we have Macindoll said, peace to the Saints. The big homie is dropping so much game. This is how you know the Saint would have made a great military general and country leader. Great motivator and strategist. God bless.
I appreciate that. And I still got time. You heard me. I still got time. Don't count me out. But clearly Putin is slacking because there's so many more effective things he could have done once he realized that, there was a buffer needed for Russia's safety. Let's hear a little bit on this. This one was published 5 days ago, and this is Michael Clark. And by the way, Sky News, sometimes they have things that are reasonable, but I see that they're also just a propaganda outlet. It's quite pathetic. Let's hear some propaganda. Just by the way, they're pro-Ukraine.
Officially, the Kremlin says that the war is going to plan.
It might be going to plan, but I do want to point out that their plan sucks. Putin, your plan sucks, little buddy. Okay? Terrible. You're a terrible general. Terrible commander in chief.
Положительно. Все развивается в рамках плана Министерства обороны, Генерального штаба.
I'm not sure anybody else really believes that.
One thing I also want to highlight is that Putin, or shall we say Russia, like the United States, these are highly developed countries with significant firepower, shall we say. But consistently, both Russia and America have done an atrocious job at trying to dominate smaller, weak, irrelevant countries. I mean, America went into Iraq, stayed there for a long time. Couldn't beat them. America went into Afghanistan, stayed there a long time, couldn't beat them, had to leave out in shame and disgrace. America tried to get in the Syrian war, couldn't beat them, had to exit through the back door. And so it's like you see America and Russia doing the same thing. It's like they're both second-rate powers. The only real power is the one that is kind of like not even the sleeping giant, it's a low-key giant, which is China. China's been very effective everywhere they've gone. And you might say, Mark, what are you talking about? They've not started any wars. Precisely. They don't start wars. They send a whole bunch of engineers. They give you a loan, a predatory loan, and then they send a whole ton of Chinese people so that when you're in Ethiopia, South Africa, Namibia, and various other resource-rich places like Congo, you find a ton of Chinese people. They're controlling the economy. Oh, and where did they practice this at? Southeast Asia. They did this effectively in Southeast Asia. Now they're expanding this neo-colonial model to Africa, and they're extracting everything that's good in Africa because the Africans are fools. I'll probably do another live session on how the Africans are a major disappointment. But I just wanted to point out how real powers operate effectively, and America and Russia have been doing an atrocious job.
And in Russia, I think it's now become acknowledged that this is a tougher proposition than they imagined back in February. But in theory, although the acknowledgement is that mistakes have been made, there is no way the Russians think they will not prevail because.
Yeah, mistakes. It's not that mistakes were made. It's that there was not a proper strategy to start with. And not only has Russia been guilty of this, America has been guilty of this as well. Every time we start a military engagement, we have no real plan for what the end goal is. For example, look at Libya, brilliant example. This was under your boy Barack Obama, the first black president. He's also known as the first gay president. And he went there and murdered the leader of a country, which is basically against all international conventions I'm aware of. And then what did they replace it with? Well, nothing. Now Libya is basically a backward place. And before Barack went in there, it had the highest standard of living in Africa. It also had more gold reserves per capita than the United Kingdom. So it was quite a wealthy country. And it had free education, higher education. If you get married, you can get free housing from the government. It had so many of the perks that we want in the West, free healthcare, things like this. They even, allowed people to engage in farming in the desert, which most of the country is desert, because they irrigated the desert. They did extraordinary things, but America basically bombed and destroyed all that under Barack Obama. And here's the worst part. He's the first black president. But after that, what did they have? They had open slave markets where the Arabs there were selling black sub-Saharan Africans as actual slaves. Yes, it's true. And this was under your boy Barack Obama. And I say that to say they go and break things and they don't know how to fix it or put it back together.
We have Jalon sent a PayPal. He said literally took Uzeri from 4.3 to 2.1 stars. Wow. This is tuition for your I Have a Plan speech. I appreciate it very much. Peace to the saints.
Appreciate that. And yes, and we'll talk about that maybe toward the end. But long story short, when I was in South Africa, there was a restaurant that basically tried to exercise apartheid on your boy. And this was I wasn't sure. So I asked some South Africans, I said, hey, this happened and this was my conversation. They're like, yeah, that's racism, Marquette. That's what we experience here. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we're going to deal with this restaurant. And we have. So shout out to the Saints who have supported the work in the community tab. That's where I basically posted the story. Some people saw it on live. I was on live when they were engaging me in this racist situation. So shout out to the ones who went to their review for Uzeri in Cape Town and put that 1 star, which is what they deserve. And then the owner even replied to me with a lie saying, oh, well, actually it was this and it was that. No, it was none of that because the conversation was recorded and you weren't even there. Quit lying. Carrying on.
They're Russia. They're a big power. They've got a 144 million population, a big economy. Therefore, once they put their minds to it, they will prevail. And the justifications for that come and go as the months go on.
So that's basically the same story that America has been using in their military engagements with Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and the list goes on indefinitely, right? So yeah, that's not a new narrative, but you're right that Russia made major miscalculations and they did not take their enemies seriously. And that's one thing you'll read in my book, The Black Box, which I say, always expect your enemies to behave as enemies do. You see, Russia was fool enough, let's say Putin was foolish enough to think that he would engage in a risky proposition, which is warfare, and that his enemies would not take every advantage to try to weaken him, destabilize his country, overthrow him, and eventually kill him, which is what the Americans do. They kill you. They don't put you on trial. And the reason that we never put anybody on trial, the reason Saddam Hussein didn't go on trial, the reason Osama bin Laden was murdered, the reason Muammar Gaddafi didn't go on trial, the reason they were just murdered is because these guys are not as bad as American propaganda said they were. And if they go on trial, they might say something and an average American might say, what? Gaddafi might say, when I started here, it was a backwater, poor and broken. And I brought water to the desert, not only for drinking potable water, but also to farm so that you might earn for yourself. And for those who needed healthcare, we gave them free healthcare. And for families who needed housing, we gave them free housing. And for those who needed higher education, not only did we make it free, $0, we also gave you money to go abroad and study. And I know this for a fact because at University of California, Berkeley, I personally met students who came from Libya. They're doing PhDs in mathematics. Very smart men, great in mathematics and had fluent English, courtesy of the Libyan government. And so you might hear Muammar Gaddafi speak in a trial and say, Americans, you are so rich, but you can't afford to get sick. Americans, you pay so many taxes, but where are the benefits? You drive on broken roads with potholes. In my country, in Africa, which you would consider poor, they drive on great roads. Everyone has a cellular phone. They all have all the basics that you say you want, healthcare, education, all those things. But you don't have it. Maybe you should learn my way instead of lying about me and saying that I'm killing my people when actually I'm nourishing my people far more than the Americans are. They didn't want to hear that. No, they had to kill the boy. They didn't want him to be able to say that in an American court. So they killed him the same way they killed Saddam and the same way they tried to kill Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
Okay, we had George K came in earlier with the Cash App. Now we have George H said, would you run for president? Peace to the Saints.
No, I wouldn't run for president because this is a wicked land and we are in revolutionary times. You couldn't even run for president and win legally here, fair and square. How many times have we had issues with the vote count? Under Bush, they said there was an issue with the vote count in Florida. Under Trump, they said there was an issue with the vote count. Why we got so many issues with the vote count? It's strange. Moreover, the population is brain dead. They don't even know what's good for them. If you have cancer, can you solve the cancer? No, you got to go to an oncologist. And sometimes the oncologists tell you what you need to do. You don't even want to do what is necessary because it seems painful. So I want you guys to understand that we are in revolutionary times. Andrew Tate is being attacked by global governments around the globe. We are in revolutionary times. Donald Trump is a presidential candidate, yet the establishment, the government's investigating him so they could throw him in jail rather than give him an opportunity to be democratically elected, which is to say they're removing an option in our democracy.
Okay, we have Glay. Henderson said, "Do you think doing threesomes with your main girl is okay, or is it a bad idea?"
I wouldn't do it. I like my main girl to be heterosexual. I like her to be heterosexual. I wouldn't do it.
Carry on.
But that's just me, though. Maybe you like to get freaky with it. Here's the propaganda. What do people in Russia think? Now, let's be real. Do you believe that any of these news outlets went all the way to Russia and asked an average Russian what they think inside of Russia? I don't think they did. I don't believe it. I think this is a similar thing to where you see, YouTube channels do a piece about Andrew Tate, and then you're like, oh, I got to make a comment on this. And you scroll down to make a comment, and it says comments turned off, which is to say they're trying to produce a very specific piece of propaganda, and they don't want the truth to get out. I think this is the same thing. What do people in Russia think? What people? This reminds me of a Vice debate when somehow they found all the village idiots and put them together.
They genuinely seem to believe that Russia is a great power, that it has not been accorded the respect that it was due, that the United States is due to be taken down. And
oh, is he summarizing? I could have sworn that heading said, what do the Russian people think? Isn't that what that is? Isn't that what the Russian people think? And they got this decrepit devil right here trying to tell us like what they think. Okay, he didn't look Russian to me. Judging by his teeth, he looks British. They say the British have bad teeth, right? There we go.
That NATO has got to be shown where the boundaries are. And so underlying any doubts about this conflict within the broader Russian population, there does seem to be a sense that it's about time.
Now, one thing he somehow is overlooking is the fact that there were political agreements in place that Ukraine, as well as a number of other satellite countries, would not be joining into NATO, and thereby encircling Russia and having basically the enemy on their doorstep. Somehow he's not mentioning that. It's very, very dishonest. Because when the special military operation started, even before then, Putin had stated, if we abide by the agreement which the nations, the other nations around have agreed to, including America, then we're Gucci. But if you guys start gobbling up more NATO partners, which is in violation, then we will have to act. And he did act, but he didn't act strongly enough. And I want that to be a lesson to all of you guys. If you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. Don't play games with it.
Time that Russia asserted itself and that the world took some notice. Now, I suspect that opinion is rather brittle, and that failure on the Kremlin's part will quickly translate into a disillusionment.
I'm really not loving the zone that Putin's in. I feel like if I was really running this whole thing right now, I would be more so in that Fidel Castro mindset. You hear me? Every time you see Zelensky, he's pretty much looking grimy, looking like he ain't slept, even though we all know he slept. And he's usually wearing like a t-shirt or something more militant. I feel like I want to see Putin in the same zone. And you're not really going to get your troops in the same zone unless you're every now and then you pull up on them front lines. You heard me? We want to see you now in military mode. I don't want to see you in a business suit. This is Russia, baby. Like, these people are serious people, and you have to let them know, like, hey, I'm in the same mindset of you as you are, which is kill everything. But he playing games right now. He's soft. He think he is savage, but he ain't a savage. That's his problem. And he's going up against real bona fide devils right now. And just side note, who is this fat dude right here? They don't even know how to do propaganda anymore. The Russians were never great at propaganda. The Germans were for sure the best by far. The Americans are very good at propaganda. But this fat dude right here, do you see this fat SOB right here? Good Lord. This is terrible propaganda. And furthermore, just side note, you're not supposed to have the boss wearing the same color as his collaborators or those under him. It's just not proper. Like, these guys know nothing.
But until the Kremlin, or unless the Kremlin absolutely fails in Ukraine, that sense that Russia has a right to pursue this operation, to assert itself in Europe, I think goes very deep into the Russian popular psychology.
Ukraine didn't fall.
See, you see the difference? You see, that's what I said. He's in a t-shirt. He's in something like military looking. He has a different spirit about him. And that's why I can tell that Putin is out of touch with Like he's not a real military guy. Like he might be a dictator, but he's not a real military guy. That's one thing we have to respect about the other people that I mentioned. Like, for example, when we're talking about Fidel Castro, he was a guy who basically engaged in guerrilla warfare throughout the Sierra Maestra Mountains in Cuba. And he trained in Mexico, and like his pedigree of being a guerrilla warrior is legitimate. Him and Che Guevara. And then if you look at Muammar Gaddafi, he was also a military guy. He came up through the military ranks. He knows war and he understands military brass. Putin just seems like a dictator. Like he doesn't really have that military, and it's weird too because he's coming from the tradition of, say, Joseph Stalin, who pretty much only wore that green joint, that green or that brown joint, which was like the communist uniform worldwide, which was like no flash, no nothing, no necktie, which they call it a Euro tie. So that's more Western than it is Slavic. You hear me? That's not that Russian stuff. So I would love to see him looking a little bit more suited for what's going on. Like Zelensky is good with propaganda. Like Zelensky looks like he didn't either just finish playing softball or he didn't climbed out of a bunker, one or the other. You heard me? He played co-ed softball or he just climbed out of a bunker. And that's pretty much how you should look right now. And shout out to the folks supporting the work. I see one of the Saints that just supported. Thank you.
Ukraine is alive and kicking.
For the Ukrainians,
boy, you don't know what kick it is. Y'all live, but y'all ain't kicking. Quit lying.
Okay, we have Kevin sent a cash app. He said, "Welcome back to the States. Peace to the Saints."
Peace to the Saints. Appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you for the support. Thank you to the men who pay what they owe.
this is a war of national survival. Simple as that. There was an idea before the war started that because between 30 and 40% of Ukrainians spoke Russian. President Zelensky, his first language is Russian. There was a sort of belief in some parts of the.
And I want you guys to understand that this justification is very meaningful. He said 30 to 40% of Ukrainians speak Russian. All the Ukrainians I know personally also speak Russian. Zelensky's first language was Russian. He is Jewish, though. Let us be clear on that. And that is meaningful. But this is a very similar situation to what we had with Adolf Hitler annexing certain parts of countries. And he said, we have Germans there and they're being abused. And that was his story. And in fact, it worked. That's why, that was people were a bit like accepting to what he was doing, because he mentioned that there were Germans being oppressed in certain regions. And Putin can utilize the same story, but he was much weaker, or he played much weaker than Hitler, because you see, the Russian nation state has been continuous for quite some time since the end of the Soviet Union. What they got, like 30 years since the end of the Soviet Union. Yeah, that's quite a bit of time. Hitler didn't have like 3 whole decades of stability after the end of the Weimar Republic. Can you look up when the Weimar Republic ended? Carry on.
The world, and certainly in Russia, that the Ukrainians would welcome the Russians in, accept the Russians in, and that Ukraine actually would adjust quite quickly to effectively a Russian takeover. That hasn't been true at all. And what?
See, that's not true. The regions of Ukraine that they started with definitely did welcome in the Russians. And in fact, many of those regions were effectively autonomous before Putin even went in there. So you're lying about that. But going beyond certain regions, which I think Donbass and Luhansk, if I recall correctly, going beyond that, yes, you're moving into territory where people feel like they're more Ukrainian than Russian. But more importantly, let us understand the financial aspect of things, which is that, the Ukrainians want to be allied with the West because they think there's more money in that. They're not allying with the West against the Russians due to like any major nationalism or cultural heritage, because they're more culturally allied with the Russians. I mean, for Christ's sake, I personally know Poles, people in Poland who identify as Slavic, and they look Slavic too, right? And they're in Poland, which is farther west than Ukraine. So let's be real here. They're aligning with the West for money. And that's what America traditionally has done, is we include you inside of an economic community, which will eventually rise up the per capita income in your country, and definitely for the politicians, first off. And that's how we've been operating, by spreading capitalism, as they call it.
It dissolved in 1933, and that's when he became dictator.
The Weimar Republic dissolved in 1933, right? Which is to say Adolf Hitler came in right at the end of it, and then went from 1933, basically dang near just a decade later, he's already in a world war. He didn't have 30 years of a stable country with institutions to take over and then get after it. So theoretically, Putin had a lot more going for him than Adolf Hitler did, but Adolf Hitler was a superior leader in just like every aspect, and also far more aggressive. I'd say the only way that Putin is superior is that he's not a psychotic racist. I think that's his only superiority, right? You know,
That we know of.
that we know of. That's a good point. That we know of. Yeah. I mean, but Hitler was such a psychotic racist that he couldn't hide it. You feel me? Like he was like, I got to take him out. I got to take him out. Carry on.
One of the things that has been most interesting about this whole conflict in the last year is how completely patriotic the vast majority of Ukrainians are. That has actually given.
See, that's a lie as well, because we don't have any sense of how patriotic the vast majority of Ukrainians are. In fact, my guess is that the average Ukrainian is just like the average person anywhere in the world, which is that when a war stops, they want the war over. Or excuse me, when a war starts, they want the war over. Average people have no stomach for fear. They have no stomach for death. They have no stomach for war. They want the war over. In very few cases, you have populations that are fairly either radicalized already, or they have some sort of ideology that's holding them together, or some revolutionary leader. And this is almost never the leader of a country. This is almost never a democratically elected leader. If you look at Vietnam, for example, when you had Western powers, France, America being aggressive there, and they had Ho Chi Minh was basically their revolutionary leader, a tremendous leader and a very fascinating revolutionary. It was not like an elected president. These people never captivate the population. That's a lie. It's never happened like that historically. Or you look in the Middle East when you have Americans mostly taking aggressive actions there. You never have like the president has the population so gung-ho about resisting. No, it's always like a guy like Osama bin Laden, or it's a guy like Muammar Gaddafi before he took over the government, or it's a religion like Islam, or it's a cleric like Ayatollah Khomeini. And an Ayatollah Khomeini was not the current elected leader. These are revolutionaries who come from among the people, who either appeal to some greater radical ideology of Islamofascism or of communism or something like that. So to think that Zelensky has like captivated the Ukrainian public, this is a lie. This just never happens. It does not happen in human history. There's no precedence for that. It's a lie. And the truth is, we're not getting accurate numbers on the actual devastation that the Ukrainian population is experiencing. It's probably reaching genocidal levels, and we'll never know because they're not telling the truth. How does it make sense that Russia's winning the war, yet Russia has to hire mercenaries, but Ukraine doesn't, and they start it with a smaller population? It defies logic. It's just a lie.
Okay, on Cash App, we have Jamie said, what do you think of the World Economic Forum influence on the world?
I'd have to research that to give you an intelligent perspective. And I think, truth be told, that would be something that would require a live itself.
Okay, a Plus MVP said, shout out to the Saints who stepped up to the draft against Uzeri. I also noticed that in the photos they uploaded, they have Black employees. So shameful. Peace to the Saints.
Peace to the Saints. And I saw one of the Saints that disappointed me, but it's okay because I'm here to educate. He had stated, oh, they can't be racist. They have Black employees. I thought that was funny because obviously he doesn't understand apartheid. He doesn't understand enslavement. He doesn't understand subjugation. He doesn't understand color-coded hierarchy. It's one thing to hire a Black servant to cook the food, to serve the food, and then you look at everyone enjoying the fruits, the management, the owners, they're all white. And then you look at the patrons, they're all white. Which was the goddamn problem? They let you clean in that goddamn place. They let you cook the food in that place, but you can't sit down for a meal. These people have learned nothing. They learned nothing. You know, when you had a slave plantation, yeah, you had Aunt Jemima in the kitchen cooking the food. Yeah, you ain't seen a slave plantation? All the workers are Black. When he said that, I was just thinking like, oh, they're not racist because they have Black workers. Well, let me tell you something. I have lesbians working for me. Does that mean that I think lesbianism is okay or a good thing? No, it just means the person's a good worker and they're a lesbian. So I'm like, cool, you do your work for me, the boss, which enhances me more than you. Thank you. Doesn't mean I'm okay with it or I agree with it. That's foolish. So foolish. I mean, I just hope that they've learned something. I hope that they've learned something.
Carry on.
Thank you.
In Ukraine a sense of nationhood that it has not possessed for well over 100 years. And that sense of nationhood, I think, will propel it to be a different sort of state after this war.
That was idiotic. And he's like just basically babbling right now. Oh, Ukraine getting destroyed in a war is going to give it a sense of nationhood. No, actually, it's just going to make things harder. But what will probably happen is that more of your tax dollars will be stolen to rebuild Ukraine. And what that's code language for is companies like Caterpillar, companies that provide for heavy equipment, construction, cement, roads, rebuilding hospitals, medical equipment supply companies, infrastructure companies, these big American corporations, large French corporations, large British corporations. Well, they're just going to split up, rebuilding it. And they're going to pay for that rebuild with American, French, British tax dollars. So you and I are going to pay for the rebuild. And the politicians and the people who own these large corporations, who are also typically the politicians, or either they have stock in them, they're going to become filthy rich, or they're already filthy rich. They're going to become richer. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, I know how this goes. Remind me to get some stock in Caterpillar.
The new Ukraine that emerges from this war, I think, will be thoroughly European, will be absolutely westward leaning, and it knows it will have to live.
You see what he said? He said the Ukraine that emerges from this war will be westward leaning and it will be European. Well, in actual fact, their blood is Slavic. Number one, their blood is Slavic, much closer to the blood of the Russians. Their language is much closer to that of the Russians. In fact, as we said, 30 to 40% speak Russian. What percentage speaks English? What percentage speaks German or French? Yeah, they pretty much are on that Russian side. Now, what's going to happen predictably is that because Putin's a sucker and he ain't messing with this ism, he's going to basically take a sort of an L. And what I mean is that he's going to take a L in the sense that he didn't annex the whole damn thing, and he took like heavy losses in terms of personnel, military equipment, and economic troubles. Are you expecting? Am I expecting anyone? Okay. Hello. We don't accept solicitation. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Oh, yes, sir. I appreciate your time so much. Have a good one.
Okay, go ahead.
We have Jamie came right back, said thoughts on Gates saying China is an ideal society.
Gates? Is he talking about Kevin Gates or Bill Gates? Because whoever said that was an idiot. If it was Kevin Gates, I forgive him. If it was Bill Gates, there's obviously a play there's a play he's running. There's no doubt about it. Bill Gates is a very squirrely character that we got to keep an eye on.
Bill.
Yeah, he's the same guy who said we should give vaccines to animals. He's the same guy who said we should modify animals' genetics. He's a very wicked little devil. He's the same guy without permission that's been trying to seed clouds to change climate and increase rainfall in certain parts of the world with no sign off from any government or United Nations body. Lastly, I've been to China several times, done business there, got good connections there. And China's a great place if you're a part of the government or you're friends with the government. If you're not, your life is worth nearly nothing. The quality of life outside of the major cities in China is fairly atrocious and still quite agrarian. You live like a serf. The life inside of major cities in China, like say Shanghai, Beijing, if you're not a very well-to-do Chinese business person, you're living essentially in a box. And this is true throughout China, China's major cities, and they've now taken over Hong Kong. And they let the people in Hong Kong live with greater levels of freedom, but essentially there's no personal freedom in China, which doesn't make it remarkably different than America. But for example, walking around China, periodically people would just stop, police would just stop us and like, hey, let me see your ID. Who are you? What are you doing? Just for no reason. Just for fun.
We have Jordan came in by a Cash App. He said, peace to the saints. All saints meeting today was refreshing.
Very good to hear. And absolutely, I'm going to make sure that we can record those moving forward. So, we have archives of all of that information. And soon I'll do a kind of 100K reflection when I get a moment, when when we get a bit of a lull. And I do want to do a reflection on how the organization has grown strong.
Okay, Jamie came back. He said Gates and Yuval Harari are key WEF members.
There it is.
Live with a hostile Russia for the next century or more. But it's more than prepared to do that because of this discovery, this feeling that they have.
This dude looks like he's nearly dead. I don't know if that's just me. What color are his eyes? Are his eyes just dilated, or does he have black eyes?
They look pretty dark.
There's
Big.
Yeah, that's one thing I hate to see, when like you're that pale and your eyes just look like they're black holes. Like, this man has no color. He has white hair, completely pale skin, and then like black hole eyes. Like, he looks actually evil. Like, this dude popped up on Halloween. Anyways, go ahead.
Okay, Jamie came right back again and said, along with many members of Western governments.
Absolutely.
That they now have real nationhood, nationality, and identity.
What does the West think?
Ukraine has won the Battle of Kyiv, has won the Battle of Kherson, has won the Battle of Kharkiv. Ukraine has defied Russia's expectations at every single turn.
Shout out to Joe Biden for being able to remember the talking points that his handlers provided to him. Shout out to Joe Biden. And by the way, I do have a clip from Trump, and we want to hear a little bit about what Trump has to say about this. I also think that we all should take note that Putin didn't start up this military operation under Trump's administration. He started it when this Sleepy Joe fella came into office.
So I think that the West has now decided that the Ukrainians.
And just mind you, I know Putin's not doing a great job because obviously Zelensky. Now, you never know where Zelensky really is, right? And that's a national security thing for the Ukrainians, and that's also a strategic thing for the Americans, who we know are probably providing his security. But if I were Putin, my number one target when I started the war would have been Zelensky. You always want to take out the head. And also knowing that Zelensky is Jewish and, all these other like foreign ties he has outside of Ukraine, I would have known he was going to be a problem. So I really would have wanted to take him out. Now that he's coming theoretically in and out of Ukraine, we don't know if he's coming in and out of Ukraine. He might not have been in Ukraine since the war started, right? Like, we really don't know. Technology is extraordinary. I would not be surprised if he hasn't been in Ukraine since the war started. In this image, he's obviously not in Ukraine. But Putin's number one objective should be to take out Zelensky, because once you do that, then you have some real opportunity.
Are not just losing slowly, they're actually capable of asserting their territorial integrity throughout most, if not all, of Ukraine. That will create a crisis in Russia. But the view now in the West is, well, that's Russia's problem. We can't influence that. If Putin is seen to...
See, that's the Putin that we like, just that cold killer look. You hear me? But the thing is, he's not a cold killer. Because if he's a cold killer, he'd already press that button, because I'm just itching to press it, because it's the only way that Russia can win decisively. It's the most efficient. It's the business thing to do. It's the most efficient thing to do, because we all know that Russia financially cannot compete. If it was one-on-one, Russia versus America, Russia couldn't compete. If it was just one-on-one. But it's Russia versus America versus France versus the United Kingdom versus Australia versus any Western country you can name, plus Ukraine, all going at them financially, pouring in money, pouring in weapons, spare parts, intelligence, cyber, digital attacks, everything. They can't win that war. They're going to have to hit the nuke. Now, best case scenario, Putin will be able to retain, of course, Crimea, which they had before this, and then also, some of the areas that, they annexed in the early part of the war. But really, being that you've already expended so much in terms of resource, you should seek to monopolize the whole country, or else you're going to have a persistent problem. And that's how we know Vladimir Putin really wasn't thinking ruthlessly and most effectively. Like, he had some angst and some fear. So really, I'm disappointed in him. Like, he ranks really low on my list of quality dictators. He's really moved toward the bottom. I'm very disappointed in him. He's toward the bottom with Idi Amin Dada.
Fail in this operation, and he now can be seen to fail, it is viewed in the West, then he will have to deal with the consequences. That's not our responsibility. And so I think there's been a great hardening of opinion.
This dude literally said nothing. Carrying on. Now, I think India is a fascinating situation. Can you look up, has India sent any weapons to Russia? I'm curious about that. And just to give you a little bit of background on India, I think India really likes to scam. Go ahead.
I'm looking still.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think India really likes to scam because India's kind of been like low-key allies with Russia for decades. And so the New Delhi government has taken a neutrality stance. And the truth is that, as I wrote in my book, The Black Box, which you can get on Amazon, I highly recommend it because it teaches you how to operate. And clearly, Putin doesn't know how to operate. But it states in my book that alliances change during times of war, which is to say, if someone says they're your friend or your family or they're your ally, when you go through struggle, that's when you figure out what they're really about. If they're really a friend, if they're really an ally. And India is a very large country with very significant population. They could send soldiers. They got plenty of people. They got overcrowding. I've been to India. There's too many people in there. They could, you hear me? They could export a couple 100 million and be Gucci. And they also have great technologists and beautiful minds in India. In fact, they have a university there that is known to be better than MIT in terms of technology and engineering. So that being the case, they have significant resources that they could lend to a real ally. Now, here's the thing about the New Delhi government is that they have not put any sanctions on Russia. And historically, who does India sanction anyways, right? But they've not been a strong ally. They've been trying to remain neutral. And to me, that's not a real friend. Now, if I'm Putin, if we're getting some kind of resource from India, like grain or like something critical, foodstuffs, things like that, fine. We'll let you be neutral. But if we're not getting things significant, I'd be pretty angry. And I'd probably at some point try to do India dirty.
I don't think they sent any, but India was Russia's biggest client, essentially.
So
India,
Russia's selling weapons to India.
Yeah, but now India can't really buy them because Russia needs their weapons.
Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah. But it sounds like the Indian prime minister supported Ukraine.
What do you mean by support it? Through word, though?
Through word,
through word. That means nothing. That means nothing. Yeah. I support Kanye West through word. You hear me? But if they take all his money, what did my word do for him? But yeah, so long story short, India is not an ally. That they've been a partner. Let's be accurate here. They've been a partner, and I'd be a little bit displeased. And I think in the future, I'd probably try to make some real agreements with them for military aid and these kinds of engagements. And if they couldn't give that, then I'm like, all right, cool. We'll continue doing business with you. But, we have an understanding of where you really stand. Carrying on. So I'm not even going to play this video because I know this is just like people in India like talking like nonsense. Like they're not about to say anything of consequence in 3 minutes. And this whole concept about the war ending diplomatically, this is not realistic. And the reason it's not realistic is because Zelensky has claimed that he wants Crimea back. And Crimea was in Russian hands before this special military operation even began. Correct me if I'm wrong. You look that up. I always just want to make sure that we're getting the facts. And, I know so much that I want to make sure that I'm giving it all accurately. I know so much. No, if I knew so much, I wouldn't ask her to fact check it. We're going to fact check it before CNN get over here. But realistically, if Zelensky's asking for Crimea, which they did not have before the special military operation occurred, he's basically asking for things that are unreasonable, such that there can be no negotiated peace.
Russia took it over in 2014.
Precisely. So there can be no negotiated peace. As a result, Putin will have to prosecute this war to the very end. And I do believe that since Zelensky's personal family is safe and probably, the Jewish parts of his family probably went back over to Israel and hid out there because it's a great place to hide out, whether you're, a Ukrainian Jew, a Russian Jew, or a scammer. They actually have a lot of scammers who scam Western countries from Israel, and Israel will not, what do they call it? Not export them, not repatriate them. There's a extradite. Israel will not extradite them. There's a lot of scammers. There's even Netflix specials on this stuff. But point is this: Zelensky has every incentive to prolong the war, and he's angry at Putin, and he thinks that he can basically bankrupt Russia and weaken them significantly. I think if he still has common sense, he knows that he can't beat Russia. Russia will not lose. Russia will not cease to exist. Russia is going to remain, number one. Number two, and the Russians are nationalists. You heard me. Russia ain't going to cease to exist as a country. Putin might cease to exist, but not even that will happen because he has such a strong hold on the internal infrastructure in Russia. And also, a lot of the oligarchs have been eliminated, either due to Putin taking them out, weakening them financially, jailing them in some cases. And more importantly, the West has seized the financial assets of a lot of the oligarchs. And that was actually dumb on the part of the Western powers, because once you've seized the assets of the wealthy class in Russia, you've now eliminated the natural competition to their governmental leadership. I mean, duh, think about it. Is Donald Trump not an oligarch in America? As Adolf Hitler said many years ago, he said America is a plutocracy. A plutocracy is a government run by the rich. Hence, it is the wealthy classes in America. Most of Congress are millionaires plus. Oh, Nancy Pelosi is a great example. She scammed the American public. Insider trading made her many times over a millionaire. But anyways, the wealthiest class in any country, those are the competitors for political power. That's why Trump, a billionaire, ran for office and was able to win, because he's very wealthy. He can finance his own campaign, and he also had celebrity appeal. Similarly, the oligarchs in Russia would have been the major competitors to Putin for leadership in Russia, whether they were a Western puppet or whether they actually ran as an honest, independent candidate. But now that the West has, taken all their assets and weakened them financially, they really don't have anything to stand on when they're pursuing power. So that was actually quite stupid, and it really consolidated Putin's hold over the Russian power structure. It was really foolish. Just shows the utter lack of long-term thinking and strategy in the American government. Here's what Putin says to Germany. And here's the thing with Putin. He's becoming the boy who cries wolf, because it's like, bruh, at a certain point, you got to do something, brethren. You struggling with this little country called Ukraine. The Western powers are sending in all of their money and all of their tanks and weapons. We know there's mercenaries over there. American Marines have been killed there. So we know Americans actually have soldiers on the ground under various cloaks. So the West is fighting you. And you keep saying if the West gets involved, you're going to do this or do that, but you ain't done nothing. Bro, you got to do something, okay? If it were me, I would nuke Kiev. That's just me, though. Carrying on.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued a stern warning to Germany over its proposed delivery of Leopard tanks to Ukraine. The Russian leader's warning to Berlin was made in a speech that he gave to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was fought between the Nazi German troops and the Moscow-backed Red Army between August 1942 and February 1943.
And I don't even know why he's trying to compare those, because, bruh, you ain't built like Joseph Stalin. He was a real goon, number one. Number two, you're not fighting anyone on the caliber of the Nazi Germans. That's number two. Is that number three? It don't matter. But like, this comparison's not even realistic. This is like super soft. Like, all of this stuff is super soft. This is all lightweight compared to what those boys were doing. All right. This is lightweight stuff. But I will say that it's ultra disrespectful that Poland goes against Russia. Just from a historical perspective, let us be clear that it's the Nazi Germans that went and destroyed and abused Poland like a maidservant. You did Poland greasy. And it's actually the Russians, who defeated the Nazi Germans and basically helped save the United Kingdom, helped Poland, helped America. And it's like somehow we forget all that. And the West is convinced that the Russians are their enemies. But if you ask the average imbecile citizen of the United Kingdom or America, he's like, give me 3 reasons Russia's your enemy. Give me 3 reasons. They probably couldn't give you one. Or you say, tell me one time Russia has attacked America. Go. They couldn't tell you. Tell me one time Russia has attacked the United Kingdom. Go. They couldn't tell you. And there's like no real meaningful reasons that Russia is our enemy. I'm really trying to figure it out myself.
The Red Army's victory in the long-drawn battle has been credited with turning the tide in World War II in favor of the Allied powers, which at the time included the erstwhile USSR.
Why is she reading like she just learned how to read? Can they hire somebody else? I need her fired.
Putin says that a modern war between Russia and Germany will be entirely different than the World War II battle.
That's stupid, bro. Like, just stop making like speaking in illusions and metaphors, bro. Just say what you're going to say. How about you don't say anything? How about you just do something? How about you do something?
Russia won't limit itself to armored vehicles while responding to threats from Ukraine. That was the ominous message from the Russian President Vladimir Putin as he responded to the West's decision to supply tanks to Ukraine.
Now, unfortunately, we see that the ideology of Nazism in its modern form and manifestation once again.
Come on, bro. Like, you're tripping. Like, when he's trying to compare the modern Germans who are complete imbeciles, and also very feminine. They've had a female chancellor. Are they still calling it a chancellor over there? Angela Merkel. I forget if they're still calling it a chancellor, whatever they call it. They had a female leading their country.
Yeah.
This is so antithetical to Nazi ideology, which is extraordinarily patriarchal. I mean, just stop with the silliness, my boy. Like, everything about Germany under the Nazi period is radically different. For example, they had the Hitler Jugend, which was in fact, it was actually the largest boys' youth organization in the world, including bigger than anything in China, which is quite extraordinary, which means that basically everyone had to be a part of it. Then the Germans, for the girls, they had the Bund Deutsche Mädel, which was basically the female equivalent. And that was primarily to groom good German mothers to propagate their superior DNA. And they were in very feminine positions, nothing involving politics, leadership, or anything like that. So the idea that that kind of ideology could yield an Angela Merkel, which is a female that's in the position of leadership, just doesn't make any sense. Lastly, Germany was a racial state, and purporting to have superior Aryan blood. They wanted all non-Germans, including other varieties of white, they wanted them out. So they didn't allow for the Jews to remain. They marginalized them in ghettos. They didn't allow for any whites who had Slavic blood, which more so Russian type blood. They wanted them out as well. They viewed the Poles. They said the Poles have a thin Germanic. This is a quote from Joseph Goebbels. He said the Poles have a thin Germanic layer. Under that is foul matter, which is to say that they're more Slavic. So they did not reflect Germany today, which is scared to even say the word Hitler. They're scared to even say the word Jew out loud. There's Jewish museums all over for really no good reason. And they even have a city called Frankfurt, which I've been to many times. And there's scarcely any Germans in Frankfurt. You feel me? Frankfurt is a rotting hole of filth with tremendous amounts of drug use, prostitution, open air drug market, open air drug use. I mean, I was seeing people banging needles when I'm walking through Frankfurt. This is something that would not have been acceptable under the German regime for a number of reasons. And in fact, the German regime was fairly moral in as much as they were the first government to prohibit cigarette smoking and link it to cancer and promote that as a no-no to their population. So they were quite forward thinking in that regard, and they actually valued their people. They were trying to create a homogenous state. So this is quite different. This categorization is clearly an effort, a propaganda effort by Putin to label them under a bad name. So what can you do? I'll give you guys a little bit of time. No one has been supporting the work in a while. They could at least hit the like button. That'd be reasonable, right? For this perspective, that if you know someone else on the internet that can give this kind of perspective on the current events, political, geopolitical strategy, and the historical happenings and recount it accurately with humor, let me know, because I ain't seen them yet. I will stop doing this and I will watch that channel, because I'd rather watch it than say it. To be honest, I'd rather watch it than talk it. Let me give them some time, get them likes up.
Okay, we have none of the above sent tuition.
Shout out to none of the above. Appreciate the folks who really, see the importance of these topics and understand the sophistication of the perspective. So thank you very much. And shout out to the folks who do hit the like button, because honestly, it's just out of respect. And I say that because I don't run any advertisements on this channel. There's probably $30,000 a month I can make just running advertisements on this channel. I run 0 advertisements. So when you watch this back, you get to watch it through an hour, 2 hours straight through with no ads. And so when I say hit the like button, it actually doesn't make me any money. I just think you should hit the like button out of respect.
We have Saint Ricardo said, peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints.
Jolik said, I'm going to catch the replay, whether it's on Patreon or YouTube. Peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints.
On Cash App, earlier we had Jordan T. Now this is Jordan S. said, peace to the saints. They're shadow banning the truth.
Oh, all day, every day. And the Matrix has us under tremendous attack. You have no idea.
And we have Jay said, the black box is fire. Peace to the saints.
In a real way.
And St. Ricardo is letting people know he likes the video the day before.
See, that's a real one right there. That's a real one. And we're actually under such attack from the Matrix right now. There's just so many things I'm not mentioned because I don't want to embolden our enemies to say, oh, it's working or it's getting to them. No, that's not what a strategist does. But yeah, we are under attack. Believe that. But you never see a vet sweat. You dig.
Carry on.
Again, directly threatens the security of our country. Again and again, we have to repel the aggression of the collective West. Those who drag Germany into a new war and expect to win on the battlefield do not understand.
This boy looked like he had a mega church, don't he?
It does.
This boy is at a mega church. Where is this man at? They about to have some scribblers come out after this speech.
We have Vilkin said, my bad, big homie, out here hustling with the ism in the background. No ads. Who else is doing this? Please keep going. Here's tuition.
Right. It's people really don't have. I mean, if they can make an extra 30,000 a month, they wouldn't do it. But they don't have any respect for the fact that I want you to be able to exercise while you do this, do whatever you're going to do while you watch this. And this has been the whole time this channel has existed.
Okay, we have Joshua came back on PayPal. He said, I appreciate when you do these lives. Very important work.
Appreciate that. Shout out to the real ones.
Carry on.
This man is at a mega church right now. I feel like he about to have some fat black women come out and sing gospel. He about to have a white dude who looks like he's about 35, but he probably like 40. He just trying to look young. You know how the mega church pastors, they don't really wear a suit. They be wearing like a hipster beanie and stuff. I feel like a hipster beanie mega church 35-year-old white guy pastor is about to come out and start playing guitar. Jesus, we love you. Like singing some gospel song I ain't never heard in my life because it's really not a gospel song. He and his like failed band made it up. And it's on Spotify right now though. This is weird. This is super weird. What are the colors of the Russian flag? Aren't they like red, blue, white? Look that up for me. I just don't think.
Yeah, it's red, white, blue.
Red, white, and blue, right? That's the Russian flag colors, right?
Correct.
This dude is an imbecile. He doesn't even know how to do propaganda. Why you got this red, yellow? This is despicable. My Lord, I hope my propaganda team is better than this. You caught up?
Yeah.
That a modern war with Russia will be different.
Oh, heck no. That boy was asleep. Hold on, let me see.
That a modern war with Russia will be
That
different.
boy was asleep. Swear to God. Oh, their propaganda team is terrible. Either he was asleep or they just caught him right there on that blink. But I'm gonna go ahead and say he was straight sleep. Putin probably had him killed after this. Look, this dude in the blue shirt next to the dumb broad who's like for some reason like video recording it on her phone as though there's not 30 cameras and it's not about to be on Russian state television. What an idiot. Y'all see the old boy sleep right there? You see him? He dead knocked out.
If Putin's warning wasn't enough, the Russian defense minister earlier today released a new video. It showed Russia's T-90M Proryv tanks holding drills emulating target hitting of enemy armored vehicles and aircraft. Besides,
this is some cold stuff though. Like if you're one of them savages that wanted to go into the military to catch a body, I've met a couple of them. If you're one of them dudes, like this is it, man, because you're getting to use all of the weapons that you've been trained on. This is lit.
We have None of the Above sent a PayPal. He said he's done with YouTube and he wrote more tuition.
In a real way. Shout out to None of the Above. He said he done with YouTube. He ain't messing
That's
with
what
it.
he said on YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough. You caught up?
Caught up. Yeah.
Are you?
We have
Baller alert. Shout out to the ballers. He didn't came in like 3 times, didn't he? Today?
No.
I thought he came in on PayPal or Cash App.
There's 2 Joshuas.
Ah.
One Joshua was the one that did the rapping.
Oh, okay,
Not
okay.
Saint City Joshua.
Got you. Okay. Shout out to all the Joshua. Shout out to all the Joshua. Shout out to the ballers. You dig? Appreciate you.
Peace to the Saints tuition.
Peace to the Saints.
It's Germany's Leopard tanks. The US has pledged delivery of 31 M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. The United Kingdom will send some of its Challenger tanks. The Western tanks are expected to arrive in Ukraine in
Just side note, you know what I would be doing right now if I was China? If I was China right now, I would wait until the West is kind of like depleted their military supply, and then I would just go take over Taiwan. Formally, I would just go take over Taiwan, just straight off rip. Like after the West is like kind of like exhausted their war chest and everything, and they kind of have a distaste for war, I'd go take over Taiwan.
Okay, we have Brandon said, got a proclaimed Christian's number at the gym. Says she's reads the Bible daily. How do I approach getting the box considering she will probably claim chastity? Note she became devout after high school.
Oh, that's special because usually, yeah, that sounds fake to me. Shout out to her and all the women around the world scamming, claiming that they're Muslims and claiming that they're Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Mormons. Shout out to all the scam artists. You dig? People think Nigerians be scamming, but it's really these chicks out here using these religion scams. So number one, what I would do if I were you is I wouldn't like try to make like I'm like a serious Christian if I'm not. I would leave that to her. Number one. Number two, I would not talk overtly about sex, sexuality, sexual topics. Number three, I will put the pressure on her physically, meaning like in person through physical touch and escalate it, but I would never talk about it. I would never have any conversations about it. I put the pressure on her 3 different times. So, you know, like after the second date, maybe go for the kiss. On the third date, go for the smash. See how far you can get. On the fourth day, go for the smash. See how far you get. On the fifth day, go for the smash. See how far you can get. And then start distancing yourself. If you didn't get the smash already, start distancing yourself and then waging psychological warfare. But don't ever denounce her religion. Don't ever call her the hypocrite that she is. Just let her know that you're trying to have some human affection, and then let me know how that goes.
Carry on.
In the coming weeks. What's more, the US has already dispatched its state-of-the-art Bradley infantry vehicles to Kyiv as Ukraine anticipates a spring offensive.
So let me go ahead and say the Bradley is basically a tank, and I think that certain Western powers that they're clever and they try to use, they call it like a heavy vehicle, heavy armor vehicle. They essentially are tanks, and they're trying to use certain categorizations to make it seem like they're not helping at a certain level. And then as they like kind of find out that Putin's not going to be as aggressive as he claimed, and as they get the American population, the Western citizenry to come along with them, then they start admitting that they're sending heavy artillery there. I mean, these are look at these vehicles. I mean, these are essentially tanks.
From Russian.
Like if they'd have sent these out in World War II, we'd have called them tanks. They're tanks.
We have Walton came back and got some more.
Word to Big Bird. What do you get?
He got 2 of the tie-dye shirts on Man and Woman brand. We
actually have new ones up there. I'm about to get one too.
He got the Milky Way.
Okay.
And he got the classic rainbow, which is like a brighter rainbow.
That's the one I'm gonna get. That's actually the one I'm about to get. Remind me to put that on my list. I'm gonna cap that today.
Carry on.
That one's cold. It has more pop to it.
I like the Milky Way one.
There you go. I'm gonna have to check into it.
Forces. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Russia still has the resources to mount a large-scale offensive.
Duh.
The Ukrainian leader says that Kyiv would need fighter jets and long-range missiles.
Now, let me point out something to you guys. We all know that you cannot all of a sudden get fighter jets dropped in your lap without also having fighter jet pilots dropped in your lap. The idea that Ukrainian pilots are being trained up quickly enough to be effective in American-made fighter jets or French-made fighter jets, whoever's actually supplying them. The idea that they can be trained up quickly enough to be effective in those aircraft is ludicrous. It's just utterly ludicrous. And the idea that they still have enough pilots to man these aircraft is also ludicrous. So, and also I'd love to know, like, how is it that Putin has not found a strategy to stop the significant stores of arms from getting into Ukraine. That's why my first strategy would have been to bombard those borders that I spoke of, namely the Polish and the Hungarian border. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay, we have Aaron said, peace to the saints. Why is war inevitable with human nature?
I don't think war is inevitable with human nature. I think war is inevitable with European nature. If you look at, and Noam Chomsky speaks of this, the Europeans fought several wars with one another throughout the early centuries of European monarchy. And I think that those folks have a warlike nature. And I think that probably came out of the environment that they evolved in, which is one where there's actual scarcity, snow. Like you have to be one who plans. You have to be a bit more ruthless. And when you have European nature, wherein they are able to successfully leverage technology, and then they engage with things like the Germans called Lebensraum, which is to say the search for living space, even though they really didn't need living space, right? They were seeking it anyways. When you have European nature, all of the other peoples of the world are essentially reacting to this aggressive population, because you actually have not seen any other variety of man, if you will, do what the Europeans have done, which is to say, travel to other lands and subjugate the populations there, typically through the use of superior technology and higher levels of ruthlessness. So that's really not occurred. And when you look at the Chinese, for example, they have all the technology that they need. They definitely have the population to claim Lebensraum, which is to say living space, that they need to go conquer land to get more living space. They certainly need it, but they've not been aggressive in the same way we've seen from the Europeans. Only the Europeans have done this. There are no other colonial powers than the Europeans. And so basically they've militarized the entire globe, and other nations that could have been considered inferior, look at the BRICS, Brazil, India, China, etc. They start to militarize because they need to be protected. And so what you now have is a race toward militarization. Not to say that other nations outside of Europe didn't fight wars, but just the level of aggressiveness has just been unparalleled. And so that's basically militarized the world. And that's really why we have things like climate changes, because they create a certain mode of living that has dominated the planet Earth, and has been fairly dangerous and unpleasant.
Okay, we have Jay Smooth sent tuition.
Shout out to Jay Smooth. Yes, indeed.
Very good.
Missiles to counter the upcoming onslaught.
And they busting off
So
real
far,
clappers.
the U.S. has refused to cede to Ukraine's demand of supplying it with F-16 fighter jets. It remains to be seen if the Biden administration would revisit the decision
When
amid
is Biden's
continued
election?
pressure from Zelensky.
How long that boy been in office?
There is another big question here.
Damn, just 2 years. We got 2 more years with this boy. Ain't no way. Ain't no way.
2024. So this whole year and then next year.
Good Lord.
How far would Russia be willing to travel to counter the West's moves to arm Ukraine with modern tanks? Will Moscow once again resort to large-scale deployment of fighter jets in Ukraine? Make no mistake.
I mean, they have to. I mean, if I were them, I would start bombarding that western flank ASAP. And I might accidentally hit some of the
Okay, we have Major Mind and Soul said, let us not forget the European is the original savage. See the Moors versus the wild men circa 1440.
Now, Europeans go hard. I mean, look, let us make no mistake. Europeans go hard. Now, they soft as I don't know what nowadays. So you find the white man of today has nothing on the white man of, say, like 70 years ago. That boy was a goon. And if you take it back a little farther than that, that man was a super goon. The white guys today are turbo soft. And the Africans today are turbo soft, but I think the Africans have long been soft. Yeah, we just keeping it funky out here. We keeping it funky. Carrying on.
Mistake about it, that Putin's political future hinges on the outcome of the war.
Duh.
The upcoming spring.
Man, they busting off all kind of oops. I need me a couple of these. So here we go. Our next clip. This is a Ukraine war. Why won't the U.S. send fighter jets? Well, the U.S. will send fighter jets, but what we need to be honest about is, why doesn't the U.S. tell the truth about the fact that they're also sending fighter pilots? right? Like they're not just sending fighter jets. Like for example, say Fiona doesn't drive stick, right? You don't drive stick shift. Do you drive
Sure.
stick shift?
No.
You can't drive stick
Not at
shift.
all.
Cool. So if I send you like 10 cars, they could be Ferraris, Lamborghinis. If they're stick shift, it's of no use to you. And I want you to be in a race, a car race, right? I want you to be in a car race. And I sent you a bunch of cars that have stick shift. I could teach you how to drive stick shift and you could actually figure that out, but you wouldn't be good enough at driving stick shift to win a race, right? To do it competitively. So what I actually have to send you are not only the cars that are stick shift, I also have to send you someone who can drive the stick shift car. They're going to send pilots. We're lying here. We're being lied to here. America's sending pilots. United Kingdom is sending pilots. France is sending pilots. We're being lied to.
Former Director of Military Operations in the Ministry of Defence, Air Marshal Edward Stringer. Great to see you as always, Edward. So let's touch on this first point. So the US has ruled out sending jets. Is that to be expected? Why are they?
For now. They also ruled out sending tanks before. So we see how this game goes. What they're doing right now is they're prepping us. They're priming the population for this to happen. And if I were Putin, I'd already start messaging to the American citizens, do you want to die in nuclear war? Like, question that. And I would utilize that to get Biden out of office. And I think Trump would be willing to wind this down and withdraw because Trump is about money. And he doesn't want to bleed Americans dry in another European conflict. This is essentially a European conflict. And who really benefits from Ukraine? Well, mostly Europe, right? Who really benefits from Russia? Mostly Europe. So we don't have major strategic ends in this war other than weakening an old Cold War foe, when really our true foe is China. So what are we playing games for?
Making that decision.
I think they're making the decision now for two reasons. Biden has always been sensitive, one could argue quite cautious, about making sure that he doesn't send what might be seen as advanced offensive weaponry and therefore allow Putin the out of being able to claim that he's up against the whole of NATO. And there are a few things as
well, that's not a meaningful argument. I don't know where they got this imbecile. Is this a British imbecile, this guy that's talking? This guy's a fool. If you're sending tanks, you're sending heavy weaponry. If we look at the end of World War II was decided by tanks. If I recall correctly, the Germans had the Panzer. Let me know if the Germans had the Panzer tank. It was a good tank during World War II. It was so good that you basically could have one German tank versus 3 Russian tanks. The only reason that the Russians were able to overcome them is because that they could their wartime production was significant, and they could produce 3 to 4 Russian tanks to go against one German tank. That's how they defeated them. Yeah, it was the Panzer, right? Yeah. So how people don't support work like this, I don't know. Who knows this stuff? I don't know. I thought it was just me, but let me know. Apparently there's somebody else. Anyways, you got this imbecile here, this British dweeb right here, who basically is claiming, well, the Americans don't want to send these missiles or these fighter jets because then it will be NATO involvement. Dude, the NATO's sending tanks. NATO has sent long-range rockets or mid-range rockets. NATO sent armored vehicles. NATO's giving intelligence. NATO has mercenaries in there that are funded by NATO countries. Dude, that argument doesn't make any sense. And we all know that Zelensky is primarily going to use these weapons for defensive purposes, because it would only play into Putin's hands if he used them for offensive purposes, and then Putin could more reasonably press that button. If it was me, I'd have pressed it already. I'd have pressed it off rip, low key. Carrying on.
Obviously and totemically American as the F-16, and so he will see sending F-16s as possible.
And aren't F-16s older? What are we just trying to unload these? Let me know when the F-16 was produced. That sounds like an older jet.
Escalatory, as President Macron put it. But there's another reason as well, and that's because to get the best out of something like the F-16, NATO air power runs things called combined air operations. And that involves refueling aircraft, airborne radar platforms, electronic warfare aircraft, et cetera, to get the best out of the F-16 and deliver air supremacy. If you don't have that entire package, then the F-16 really is little better than the MiG-29s or the Sukhoi 27.
MiG, I believe, is a Russian-produced aircraft.
They were produced from 1973 to
Oh, God.
2017, and they came back 2019 to present. They're still being produced. So they took like 2 years off.
Okay, so it's an old piece of aircraft, and basically the military industrial complex in America is finding a way to offload this this aged military equipment so that they can press the American government to buy new military equipment and rearm. It's quite comical and sad, really. Very funny. And the MiG is a Russian aircraft, right? You're about to be a military expert messing with your boy. I could have swore the MiG was a Russian.
Sevens that the Ukrainians already operate.
So to really make a difference in this war, it would have to be that full service offering, not.
It's a Russian aircraft manufacturer.
Yeah. And here's the thing. What you're hearing this guy say is that they can't just deliver, here's this F fill in the blank American made aircraft, which is low key old technology. There's an entire suite that has to come with it for it to operate effectively. When they're talking about air supremacy, I don't think they're going to get air supremacy. I think they're going to be competitive in the air. And for them to be competitive in the air, they're going to need all kinds of technologies to support this, right? Defensive technologies, right? Like all this different stuff. And also they're going to need personnel, intelligence agents, and, technologists that can operate all this stuff. And that means they're Americans. So the idea that America is not fighting Russia right now is ludicrous. I think this is maybe the closest that we've had a proxy war where it wasn't actually a proxy war. It's actually just America fighting. This is pretty much America fighting right now. Because formerly when we have proxy wars against Russia, we'd actually use the foreigners to do it. Like when we were in Afghanistan, like way back with Osama bin Laden. Oh yeah, and you guys might not know, Osama bin Laden was created by America. Like we funded him, American government funded him, and they armed him with weapons and training. Yes, I believe it was called the Mujahideen then. Yes, I believe it was the Mujahideen, and bin Laden and all these Islamists were funded, trained, and armed by American money and American CIA, and we let them do the fighting. You know what? They're great fighters because they're ideological, and they're fighting for blood, soil, and religion, blood, soil, and God. I mean, those are powerful forces. And so we actually let them do the fighting, whereas now technology is so advanced and you need aircraft and all this other stuff that we actually have to do it ourselves. We didn't give bin Laden like airplanes, right? I mean, we didn't do that. We gave him like, short range missiles that you could operate off of your shoulder. Or you could, put, a tripod in the ground and, give them like proper guns and spare parts. But this is different. This is very different.
Not just the jets. What difference do those two options make?
Yeah. If you were to put the whole package forward, and that would be very difficult to do, to take the Ukrainian Air Force in its current size and train it on all of those aircraft and gift them all, and were you to do that, we'd be really back where we were at the start of this conflict, because that would now look like us running a no-fly zone, and you will remember the political arguments why that was unacceptable at the time. So if you do just gift the F-16, yes, it will help the Ukrainian Air Force, of course, because you'll be giving them replacement aircraft, but it won't be a game.
Whoa, now let's use our brains again, Saints. He said you're giving them replacement aircraft. What happened to their initial aircraft that they had? Okay, Ukrainian Air Force, they're getting replacement. Replacement would suggest that their aircraft that they had is no longer in existence or no longer functional. I do recall when Barack Obama attacked Libya, they created a no-fly zone, and they basically destroyed his aircraft while they were their Air Force, while they were still on the ground, which is a great strategy. This has happened before historically. This is not new. It's very smart and wise, and it was illegal. Just side note, United Nations did nothing about it. America is a rogue state, and America basically controls United Nations. Noam Chomsky has spoken about this many times if you want to find elaboration. But if indeed Russia did not destroy the Ukrainian Air Force while they were on the ground, and they actually destroyed them in the air, then that would mean that they would have also killed the pilots, right? So if they killed the pilots, then we again come back to this idea of who's going to operate this stuff. So we're being groomed for America to send heavier weaponry, and the only thing that's going to stop America from pouring in more money and more weaponry is a nuke. That's it. That's all Putin really has.
We have none of the above is back on PayPal. He said NATO was essentially sucker punching Russia and then hiding their fist, all while verbally demonizing Russia, providing boxing lessons and first aid kit to an injured Ukraine. But hey, they're not directly involved, so it's cool. Sarcasm. Who needs Netflix when you have a comedy like this? LOL.
Right. And then Putin's such a terrible general right now, commander in chief, shall we say? He's such a terrible commander in chief that he sees this going on, but he's reluctant to do the obvious thing. And what he's waiting for is for his hand to be pushed to where he's basically Hitler in the bunker, right? Hitler essentially committed suicide in a bunker. I think it was him and Ava Brown, if I recall correctly, him and Ava Brown, which was basically a young, good-looking blonde who is essentially like his main piece. Never married her. She came from a Catholic family, but he never honored her with marriage. He wanted to be single for his audience, and she was right there. She was super down, and she was right there in those ending moments of World War II. And I want to say they took cyanide, if I recall correctly. I forget, but you can let me know how Hitler died. I think he died in a bunker taking cyanide with Ava Brown. But anyways, it seems like Putin wants to get to that situation where this fool is in a bunker, like on the brink of losing. And he's like, okay, press the button now. It's like, bro, come on, man. Like, what are you doing?
It says suicide via gunshot.
Oh, he shot himself. Okay, there you go. And I think Joseph Goebbels and his family, I think did they take cyanide and then he shot? I'd be curious. Now, Joseph Goebbels was a real writer. That was his head of his minister of propaganda and public enlightenment. And he took out himself, his wife, and the kids. That was hood. And I think the family dog too, but for sure himself, his wife, and the kids. That was hood.
Oh, this other article says that he swallowed cyanide and shot himself.
Okay. Either way, it was suicide. Either way, it was suicide. You're not gonna confirm that second one though?
I'm
okay.
Working on it.
Game changer. You're just giving them more of what they got, and they'll be able to do what they do now a little bit better.
And so, why the sort of different tactic when it comes to aircraft compared to tanks from certain Western
Right, that's a good question. Why are tanks and aircraft so different, huh?
countries?
Well, if you look at those two tests I used, you can see actually there was a problem with the optics. And certainly Chancellor Scholz didn't want to send just Leopards forward, where the optics then would have been
the tank said American on it. No.
a very obviously German main battle tank sweeping across the plains towards Russia. And he wouldn't send the Leopards until the Americans said they would send, as you see here on the screen behind, their M1 Abrams tank.
Now, I'm looking at this. I don't know where this train is, but this train is moving super slow. I feel like if you gave me a long-range missile and like maybe like 2 hours to use Google search, I feel like I could figure out how to hit this shipment. I'm wondering what is Putin on right now. I feel like I could figure out how to hit that shipment. Just give me a Google search in 2 hours.
Thanks. But the second condition isn't the same, because sending tanks to the Ukrainian army, which is bigger, it's more organized relative to
Notice you're just seeing the outside of the tanks. You're not seeing any of the personnel that's operating them because it's Americans.
To its air force. And it's demonstrated it can conduct the equivalent of combined air operations, the all-arms battle on the ground. Therefore,
Saints, I'll give you a little bit of time to, if you want me to keep going, let me know. Send it in. If you have had your fill and you just got some closing questions, go ahead and send that in, because we can start winding down. Actually, I do have more information here, but I always like to over prepare. I think the other YouTubers just start talking. I think that's what they do. That's why it doesn't sound good. You're listening to them. It's kind of boring. They just start talking. See, here's what you're being prepared for. And this is CNN, one of the most evil propaganda outlets in America. And if you guys think that CNN and Fox News are different, you're mistaken. Actually, they're marginally different. You'll notice anytime there's a war, both of them are super pro-war. And also when that COVID thing was around, they were also both promoting the vaccine. Yeah, true story. Carrying on.
1954, then Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev decided that Crimea, a peninsula in the Black Sea, should be part of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic instead of the Russian one. And so it was.
Why they're bringing up like ancient history right now is beyond me. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Further, pretty much everyone in Russia, as far and as well, objective historical observers, they don't respect Gorbachev's or Gorbachev and like those later Soviet unions and the way they basically crashed the country. Like Russians in Russia today don't appreciate Gorbachev and Khrushchev and some of those later leaders that pretty much crashed the Soviet Union. And anytime I speak to people from former Soviet Union states, whether we're talking about a Ukraine, Uzbekistan, any of the stands or any of these random little countries you forget about, Georgia, just these little random countries that don't really matter anymore. They had better education under the Soviet Union. They had more power because they were associated with a bigger country. They were protected. They were better organized. They had access to technology transfer. They were just in a much stronger position as a part of the Soviet Union. So a lot of these countries, you have a lot of people who grew up under the Soviet system, and they actually prefer it and saw it as a better thing than what their children grew up under. And a lot of times when that Soviet system crashed, you had significant starvation in these states.
Okay, we have Alone said, peace to the saints. Let's keep going. And on Cash App, Ron came back with tuition.
Shout out to Ron. Shout out to Alone.
Was transferred, and so it stayed Ukrainian territory even after the breakup of the Soviet Union. But in 2014, Russia took it back with force.
Need it.
Today, many have suggested that Russia will never let it go and Ukraine can never get it back. My next guest begs to differ. Retired General Ben Hodges, the former commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, wrote about his view in a recent piece in The Economist. He joins me now. Welcome.
Now he could say whatever he wants to say. He's retired. He's out of the game, and he's collecting money by being a commentator and an author. And I want you guys to understand how this hustle goes. You see, he's no longer employed. He's no longer a military general. Those are not really transferable skills, right? Unless you're going to be like working at a weapons company, which is what a lot of them do, or they become CNN commentators, which is what he's doing right now. And you have to say something that's unusual to be able to make money. I want you guys to understand this. Like, even if you're an academic, if you get a PhD, the reason why, for example, if you look at Africa, people have such strange views of Africa being backward, because all of the people in anthropology who want to make a name for themselves, they have to discover something new, or they have to talk about something no one else is talking about. So rather than talk about, the modern Botswana government and the high per capita income and the long legacy of democracy and peace that exists in Botswana, they're going to go to the most remote part of Botswana, the country, and find the Ooga tribe. And they're going to write a paper and do an ethnography and live with the Ooga tribe for a year. And then they're going to be an expert on the Ooga. And people are going to come to them, and they're going to get to go and speak to colleges and talk on CNN because they're the only person who knows about the Ooga Booga. But in reality, who cares about the Ooga Booga? Like, nobody, not even people in Botswana care about the Ooga Booga. It's just some random white guy who got a PhD at Berkeley in anthropology and needed to be able to discover something, so he could write a book. This is the kind of similar hustle that you get with these guys who are former military. And then they got to say something unusual, go against the grain, go against popular or conventional or common sense opinion, so that they can say something, or they just say what the powers that be want them to say.
Okay, we have Vilkin said, peace to the saints, more support. Talking about parts of the World Economic Forum in your next live tomorrow on the Matrix will be very insightful, Saint, because they may be the Matrix themselves. Keep going.
Send me a link, DM me a link for a piece that's saying between 10 to 15 minutes on them that you want me to check out.
LTG Stan said, did you hear about the Russians going to Turkey and Syria? Do you believe that they caused the pipe explosion? Will humans ever overcome tribalism, maybe with the internet?
So number one, the Russians have been in Syria for a long time. They've been in Syria for a very long time. In fact, they've been supporting Bashar al-Assad, and that's the only reason that Syria has maintained any level of self-determination against the West. With regards to Turkey, that's something we need to research more. In terms of will human beings overcome tribalism, I think that is probably a no. But I do think that certain things will break down more and more, but not for good reason. You know, ethnicity and culture and heritage have their place, and those are the things that are breaking down, and we probably need them more than ever. So yes, like even when I was in South Africa, there's a number of tribes. I was among these people, but they have no real culture. These people are trying their best to be white. You find women who are Xhosa and they speak Xhosa, and they'll even be speaking in their language. They can recognize others who are from their tribe, and you know, but their great goal is to look like white women and to live in that way. And when they speak English, they try their best to sound like proper Brits. So everything that they strive for is to get rid of the markings of culture. And I ask these people about their history. They know nothing of their history. And that'll probably I'll dive into that in an upcoming live that I'll do. And then when you put maybe with the internet, well, the internet is a good thing, but it exposes human nature, which is quite unimpressive. We're in an age called the information age, yet everyone's ignorant. I repeat, we're in an information age, yet everyone's ignorant. There's a brother and sister who are on TikTok. They're from, I believe, Nairobi. They dress like they're part of the Maasai. And I have a good friend who's actually a Maasai warrior. Like literally, he's actually a Maasai warrior. He's a real one. They let this guy through the airport with a machete. I kid you not. I don't even know. I was like, Nelson, do you check that machete? Like, what do you do with that when you're child? How did you get that here? But anyways, the point is this: they're both Maasai, and they use their cell phones to make TikTok videos, not to learn how to code, not to learn something that might benefit their community, but to dance on TikTok and be goofy. And I can say Africans dance too damn much. I don't care what Africans you're talking about. African Americans, Africans in Tanzania, Africans in Botswana, they dance too much. Sure, everyone likes to be on TikTok, but when you see Chinese people on TikTok, you can actually, reasonably assume that they also have proper schooling. They have the basics of their own language, which is a language that's widely spoken. Whereas if you see a woman who's Tsonga or someone who's Zulu, they're on there dancing, but they don't even have the basics of education, meaning that they don't speak the Queen's English very well. I can't tell you how many times I was in South Africa and I was just like, Jesus Christ, your English sucks. Or I'm talking to males and they're so effeminate that I kept having to say, what'd you say? And I want to say, you're a man, speak up. Like, what are you, intimidated? Speak up. And so it just shows like major deficits in culture. And so I'm pointing out to you that the internet has not really been a good thing for people. It could be, but you first have to deal with human nature and get some character education.
Okay, we have Dontarius said, let's keep going, big homie. Definitely my favorite segment. Peace to the saints.
Okay, all right.
And on Cash App, we have Kirk. He came back to back. First one, he said, recently took my Shahada, partly due to your videos.
Okay, wow.
And then he said, you aren't religious, but you spoke well of Islam.
Yes, it's a good baseline if you don't have one.
Carry on.
And if the Deen of Islam brings peace to you, and it certainly does bring peace to the individual who reads, understands, and practices what is written in the Quran, if it brings peace to you, then, Allahu Akbar. I hope that you find that peace is a stream that flows through the entirety of your life. Carrying on. Now let's hear about this character claims that Ukraine has to cross Putin's red line to win. First off, if you think Ukraine can win, you're an imbecile. Secondly, best case scenario for Ukraine, they end up with a two-state solution, which is similar to what happened to Germany at the end of World War II, which is that you had the DDR and West Germany. So there was a West and an East Germany, and this only dissolved at the end of the Cold War. What was that, the 90s? Yeah. The end of the Cold War in the 90s when Reagan got that wall taken down and essentially the USSR was defeated and dissolved.
1990 was.
Precisely. So 1990. So Germany was split into two countries. So surely we could split a lesser country into two countries such as Ukraine. And that would be the closest that Ukraine will get to winning. If Putin was a grand strategist like your boy, Ukraine would just be gobbled up by Russia, which is the best solution for that's the smartest, wisest solution for Russia. But I think it'll end up being a two-state solution with Ukraine losing Crimea, they'll lose Luhansk and Donbass, and a couple other areas. And that'll pretty much be what it is. And that area will be controlled and administered by Russia.
General Hodges, let me first ask you what you make of the state of play right now, given that we've been hearing all this talk about.
First off, I wish they would have introduced us. Like, who's this random Indian dude? I like his suit. I like the suit. It's simple, but it's clean. What do you think?
It doesn't look well tailored.
He's not the big homie, but his suit's okay. His suit's okay. It looks clean. I'm just like, who is he though?
The Germans giving tanks, the Americans giving Abrams tanks. What is happening on the ground with?
Well, it's important that the United States.
I'm also just curious. Do they keep saying Abrams tank as an advertisement? I'm just curious because the Abrams is a type of tank, right? It's like you could say the Americans are giving them shoes or giving them boots, but they're saying the Americans are giving them Timberland boots. Like, is it like an advertisement? It's a type of tank. So they're basically giving advertisements to the weapons manufacturers. It's kind of curious.
In Germany and UK and others are finally delivering this sort of capability that would give Ukraine overwhelming combat power for an armored thrust that would be an important part of the next counteroffensive. My only regret is that it's taken so long, and it's still going to be months before the American contribution, the Abrams.
This guy's an imbecile. I hate these globalists because it's like your only regret. What do you mean your regret? Your job, based on my tax dollar that you steal, is to protect Americans. But when you go around the world invading infinite number of other countries that have not done anything to us, I don't know, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and the list goes on infinitely. Oh yeah, and then you have military bases in places that we have no business having military bases, like Saudi Arabia, where they consistently say, we consider this a holy land. Please leave the holy land. It's against our religion. And they're pretty serious about their religion, and they're waging jihad on us unnecessarily. We don't need to be there. Your job is to protect Americans. And then I got to go through these airports and get searched up like a common criminal because of your war crimes. And you're over here talking about you're just mad they didn't send the weapons earlier to Ukraine. What does Ukraine have to do with us and our safety? Nothing.
Okay, the Indian guy is an Indian American journalist, and he hosts a segment on CNN called Fareed Zakaria, which is his name, GPS, and that's what it says at the bottom. Like, this is his channel.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why he didn't really need an introduction, I think.
Okay.
It's a show.
Yeah, so he's a journalist though, but like, what's his military pedigree? Like, I guess he just reads off a teleprompter. I understand.
Tanks specifically can be part of this.
Is there a big Russian advance being planned from what you can tell on the ground?
That's a stupid question. You're asking a non-Russian general if there's a Russian advance being planned. That's an idiotic question that he does not know the answer to. And even if you asked a Russian general, he wouldn't tell you the answer. So why are we asking dumb questions?
Okay, we have Saint White sent a super chat. He said, peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints.
Do you know who that is? And then Mitchell came in on Assassin brand. He got the shirt that you are wearing.
Okay, that's what's
and
up.
he got the Assassin shirts with the Assassin shorts with the Janus logo.
I actually have those too.
You do?
I think I'm gonna wear those tomorrow. Get a good workout in. Yeah, this one, man, this is like a team jersey right here, man. This is one of those basics to have in the closet. It's clean and simple. Carrying on.
Have talked a lot about the next round of mobilization. You hear even the Ukrainians talk about there might be 500,000 Russian soldiers that are being mobilized. I'm very skeptical.
Now notice, consistently, they talk about the number of Russian soldiers. They don't talk about the number of Ukrainian soldiers. And I feel like because they don't want to be caught in a lie and say, oh, well, the Ukrainians in response are going to mobilize 300,000 or 600,000. Well, we know that they don't have that kind of military personnel. So where are these people coming from? So consistently, there's a focus on the Russian numbers, but never mention of the Ukrainian numbers.
About those numbers. And of course, the Russians want us to be worried and thinking about a looming offensive so that we're
look, this was Russian until Khrushchev gave it in 1954, that this would be Putin's red line, that this would be the one thing it is 95% Russian speaking. This is the one area that Ukraine should not go into.
Damn, he said 95% Russian speaking. They speak more Russian than the South Africans speak English. Good Lord. And it's supposed to be an English speaking country. If Crimea speak 95% Russian, y'all better quit playing and leave that alone, man. And these people are warmongers. These are the wicked people of the earth. Warmongers.
Who, on the contrary, say very much it is the place that Ukraine should stage an invasion.
Now, he's saying Ukraine should stage an invasion of a place that they lost a decade ago. You lost Crimea a decade ago. Now, here's the funny thing. How is it that Ukraine can't maintain their own land? They can't maintain what is within their border, but now we're talking about them taking an offensive position? It's not even sensible. But notice, let's see if he explains why Ukraine should do it. Like, what is the meaningful strategic reason as to why Ukraine should do it? And has no one ever explained why America somehow has a meaningful interest in Ukraine? Because let's be real, it's not a humanitarian interest. If it was a humanitarian interest, the $50 billion we sent last year, $50 billion with a B, we could have got rid of waterborne disease in Africa. We could, you heard me? We could have put so many schools throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We could have addressed the HIV/AIDS epidemic in Asia. We could have helped the poverty in Tajikistan. We could have did a lot of things with 50 billion. So obviously it's not humanitarian. It's not about humanity, about human beings, about human life. Because if you were to take a war against dirty water, non-potable, non-drinkable water, no one's going to fight you back on that, America. But you ain't went to war against that. Oh, yeah. And by the way, America, while we're spending billions of dollars, don't forget you also have problems in your own country. Don't forget about that. Oh, I guess those problems and those people don't matter much, not to the globalists.
So it's important to remember, of course, that everybody, including the United States, recognizes that Crimea is sovereign territory of Ukraine. So there's no disputing the sovereignty of.
You're lying. You're straight lying. Crimea was annexed in 2014, right? Which means it's been under Russian control for nearly a decade, 10 years. So now you're making up lies. You're a dangerous warmonger.
Mitchell decided he needed more. He just got the misandry sweatshirt, which I had to bring over because you can't really tell in the picture that it's embroidered, and it's really, really nice looking.
High quality embroidery.
Same with the Assassin or Nothing sweatshirt. They're both embroidered.
Yeah, I need them to see this. Yeah, no, this one is actually embroidered. So this one is going to last for a long time. And I like this one because it's just so gangster. The red with the black stitched in. It's so gangster. And I also think it's a conversation starter. Some people are like, oh, what is misandry? And then you get to have that conversation, which is, we need more of that. And then you're going to have some fat, ugly feminists say, what do you mean misandry? And then you get to roast them. Make sure you record it. Do it for the gram. Tag your boy in it. Shout out to Mitchell. Carrying on.
Of Crimea as part of Ukraine. I can't imagine a situation where it would be a good idea for Ukraine to go ahead and give up Crimea.
Dude, they've already given it up in 2014. What year is this guy living in? What? I mean, hold on. What is this video 10 years old? This video is 1 day old. What is this dude talking about? It was a nutcase.
Yeah, is the decisive part of this war. Ukraine will never be stable or safe or secure as long as Russian forces still occupy Crimea, and they'll never be able to rebuild their.
See, this is an ironic line of illogic that he's sharing. I want you guys to understand this. Russia has never had a problem with Ukraine. In as much as Ukraine used to be a part of Russia, it was called the Soviet Union. That's number one. Number two, the only time that Ukraine became a strategic threat to Russia is when Ukraine starts partnering with NATO. Russia's not going to allow you to partner with NATO because NATO is essentially their enemy. And it is not wise for any power to have their enemy on their flank, which is to say, share a border with your enemy country. Then they could easily move ground troops, tanks, and heavy arms into your country. That's why they need this buffer. That was the whole idea of the Soviet Union, that and exporting communism globally. And America doesn't have this issue because we have Canada to the north, which basically is little America. And then we have Mexico to the south, which we control and dictate to. And then we also have pretty much Latin America, which is our sphere of influence, right? So We don't have to deal with that issue at all. Let me get my backup camera. Saints, yeah, y'all gonna have to let me know it's real, man, because we switching cameras and everything today. Yeah, no, it's super player. The Miss Andre sweatshirt is a cold one. Here we go. Let's get back cracking with the camera. Oh no, that's not the one. It's not recognizing my camera. Hurts my heart. There we go. How you like me now? Confirm that we back cracking. Hobie said, Canada is little America. Yeah, man, cool play. Y'all know what it is. Yeah, we ain't playing games. That's what it is. Canada is little America. Let's be real about it. Carrying on.
Economy, as long as the Russian fleet is there sailing out of Sevastopol, interdicting traffic coming in and out of Odessa. So in terms of what's decisive, how can we press Ukraine to go ahead and give up Crimea?
Okay, so
see, this guy is talking like a real warmonger, and I want you guys to understand that there is no such thing as a leftist who is not a warmonger. There's no such thing as a Republican who's not a warmonger. They've done fundamentally the same things from a foreign policy standpoint. They support the same crazy actions. And the most important thing that we need to remember is when this guy is talking about what Ukraine should and shouldn't do in terms of offensive action, Ukraine doesn't have the soldiery. They don't have the finances. They don't have the power to compete with Russia. So what he's really saying is that you should continue allowing America to basically control. Oh, this whole time my mic hasn't been in use. Oh, I haven't played the webcast. Yeah, I messed that up. It's all good. This whole time, he's talking about basically utilizing Ukraine as a vassal state, which is to say that Ukraine is going to have their population devastated. They're going to be a war-torn country for a much longer time, just trying to serve America's ends, because Ukraine doesn't need Crimea. And the only way that Ukraine is going to have security is if there's a two-state outcome, meaning Ukraine is split in two, and that other side of Ukraine is then going to apply for NATO membership. And Putin is going to be too weak at that point to prevent it. And that's why if Putin is wise, he's going to seek to dominate all of Ukraine. Because if he only gets that slither of Ukraine, then he's basically going to succumb to the other part of Ukraine, the free part, which means American controlled, is going to join NATO. There's just no way that a Ukraine after a post-war Ukraine is not going to join NATO. And that's why he can't allow a post-war Ukraine to exist.
And now explain to us why it's doable militarily. I mean, Russia is a much bigger country. This is a matter of pride for them. They're much bigger economy, defense budget, and yet you say this is doable.
Yeah. So I'm not so sure that it's a matter of pride for all Russians. You'll remember 500,000 Russians left the country last year rather than be mobilized. I'm sure they like going down to Crimea to the Black Sea for their holiday, as we saw last summer. But there are no Russian soldiers that want to be in Ukraine. War is a test of will and a test of logistics. The Russian logistics system is barely able to supply the Russian troops that it has in the field right now.
See, I don't know about what this guy is saying, because one thing we're certain of is that the Russians are executing this war and basically fighting against the whole world. So, like, why are we pretending that that's not the case? And I'd say, considering they're fighting against the whole world, it's pretty impressive, because truth be told, The United States could barely dispatch Afghanistan, which is backward, didn't even have an air force, right? They didn't even have like an air force. They couldn't dispatch Iraq. How long were they in Iraq? Forever. And so you have these situations where, you know, America and American generals talking about how poorly the Russians are doing when the Russians are fighting the whole damn world at once. And the Americans were fighting just merely these backward Middle Eastern countries that were not. And here's the funny thing about the Arabs and the idiocy among the Arab states. Confirm that the mic is back on, by the way. The Arab states are so freaking petty, and their leadership is so poor. The best leader the Arabs had was Muammar Gaddafi, and he's gone now. And he actually told them in I think it was an OPEC meeting, which is a meeting of the oil producing nations of the Middle East. And he told them in a meeting, he said, you know, observe how the Americans went and took out Saddam. And he said, you guys are going to be next, right? He says, we're going to be next. And then, you know, sure enough, you saw how the Americans started moving. And the Arabs, they're going to have all of these petty differences with regards to, like, oh, you're a Sunni Muslim. I'm a Shia Muslim. You're a this Muslim. I'm a that Muslim. You're a Kurd. I'm a this. Tribalism, petty religious differences, sectarian conflict. But here's the weird thing about it. We're all Arab. We all speak Arabic. We all believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is someone important. And somehow we can't come together on those basics. Yet we're fighting against people who are essentially infidels, atheists. They don't believe in any God. They don't even believe in the Christian God that they speak about on their money. So they can't come together against a nation of non-believers who promote LGBTQ and the sexualization of children. So they can't fight clear evildoers, and they can't unite with other people who have something in common, whether it's language, heritage, racial subcategory, and religion. That's how idiotic the Arab statesmen are. Huh? Go ahead.
Okay, we have Jacob bought the misandry sweatshirt in the light pink color.
Oh, word. That's that man. He trying to set them feminists off. He trying to set them off is what he trying to do. Yes, indeed. Say, what's the cash app? I think
I'm
it's
doing it right now.
right there. Carrying on. But yeah, the reason I mentioned the weakness of the Arab statesmen is that the Arab states, when you see Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan, and I know that they're primarily Pashtuns, but when you see these different states that are Islamic states, they fight in isolation with no support from Europe, with no support from the Western world, no support from the other Gulf states, and they fight America single-handedly. So they're fighting a giant. It's like David against Goliath. They're fighting a giant with no support, and America still takes 8 years to lose, right? In Afghanistan, they taking 8 years to lose, whereas the Russians are doing reasonably okay, and they're fighting the whole world. So I think this guy is not being honest and fair in his assessment right now. And that's how we know that we're dealing with propaganda, because he's lying.
We have Esteban sent a cash app. He said, peace to the saints.
Peace to the saints. Shout out to Esteban.
Now, the Russian Black Sea Fleet is terrified of going anywhere near the Ukrainian coast, and Ukraine doesn't even have a navy. So
see, does that even sound right? Does that even sound right? Russia has a fleet. Ukraine has no navy, but Russia's scared. I mean, this guy's not even a reasonable person. Like, his lies don't even sound sensible. And you can see someone like this that has no soul. Like, you can see in him, there's no passion, there's no soul. He's saying things that he memorized, saying things that are clearly, he's a war hawk. He's a warmonger.
Okay, we have Wayne Charles sent a cash app, said, peace to the saints. Carry on, saint.
All right, sir. Yes, sir. And you know what? This guy, he's not said anything interesting, so let's skip him. He's just spewing out propaganda. Apparently, Trump is running again. I thought Trump was just talking reckless for fun because he likes to do that, but Trump is running again. Let's hear what Trump has to say about this. This is on.
The major disaster is brewing.
By the way, Trump then got darker. He been hanging out with Hulk Hogan. This man then got darker. What does he think? He
A
looks
major
healthier?
disaster is brewing. If I were president, the Russia-Ukraine war would never have happened. Never in a
That's true. It wouldn't have popped off. And what I like about Trump is I feel like we can all agree like Trump's aggressive. Like you know what I'm saying? Trump's aggressive. He's not like passive aggressive. I feel like Trump liked to get turned up. And I thought Putin liked to get turned up too, but he weak apparently.
John,
I think I'm getting hungry, by the way. What other food option do I have? You start smiling. You ain't got one loaded up, huh? That's what
I
that
have
smile
another
means.
serving of that. I had to
Okay.
go to the grocery store.
Fair
I
enough.
didn't know we'd be live for 3 hours.
I'll take more shrimp pestos.
We have Jonathan. He sent a $20 cash app with a YouTube link. I cannot copy and paste it. It got cut off. So if you want to send that to support@marquettism.com, we can take a look, but I cannot see the link on your cash app.
Okay. Word.
million years. But even now, if I were president, I'd be able to negotiate an end to this horrible and rapidly escalating war within 24 hours.
Trump, come on, bro. Within 24 hours, you can negotiate that. Oh man. And low key, I think Trump might be right though, because truth is, America is in control of everything that NATO is doing, and NATO is, when you look at who's supplying the weaponry and finance to Ukraine, it's essentially NATO, and NATO is America's dog, right? It's America's little pit bull that they go and sick on people in the European area. It's basically to deter and control Russia. That's what it is. So if America goes over there and says they want to do a deal, then the deal can be negotiated. That this is true. Now, oh, okay, that's a good option too. I'll take 2 of those.
Do it now? Or?
Nah. How long does that take?
Probably about 8 minutes to heat up. Probably 10 minutes.
Total?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you when to go.
Okay.
And I think he could negotiate that within 24 hours. And I think Trump is realistic enough that he knows that, Putin's made a major investment into this war and Putin's entire survival depends on it. So he's going to fight till the death because he has to. And I think Trump is a reasonable guy because he's been in business and he knows how to do a deal. He's not being unrealistic. And also, I don't think Trump wants to be in this conflict in general, which is smart. So I think he could probably negotiate this within 24 hours and it would end up being a 2-state solution. Like I said, I think if Putin is going for his best option, he'll press the button and he'll take over all of Ukraine. If America is going for their best option, it is to prolong the war as America, like the Joe Biden America, that America, if they're going for their best option as dictated by the war hawks, the warmongers, the industrial military industrial complex, they're going to push out the war as long as possible. Why? Because they have an infinite amount of money, your money. They're stealing your tax money every second. So they have an infinite amount of money that they can steal from you. So they're going to make this war go on as long as possible to try to exhaust Putin. And eventually they're going to try to infiltrate Russia and get his population to turn on him and then eventually kill him and drag him through the streets like Gaddafi and Mussolini. And then they'll install a puppet in Russia. And then, America's going to feel like they're really strong. But here's the thing that we haven't yet mentioned is that China does not want America to overcome Russia, because if Russia falls, then China will be just a touch more vulnerable. Because if you look on a map, and I've told you guys maps are very important, Russia and China are pretty close. And not only are they close geographically, they're close in the more important sense, which is historically. What you guys might not know is that modern China, as much as it's the result of Chairman Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping and his reforms in the 1980s, it's also the result of the former Soviet Union. And you had a lot of technology transfer and engineers sent over there under Lenin, under Stalin, and under many other leaders of the Soviet Union. So they created the modern China through technology transfer. And also they taught them ideology. China didn't become communist out of nowhere. The father of their ideology was Vladimir Ilyich Plekhanov Lenin.
Hey, Jay Smoot that sent the link, he sent it to email. I just texted to you, and he said it is the best dismantling of the warmongers I've heard in a while.
Okay. Make sure we'll hit that up before we get out of here.
Okay. EJ said, peace to the saints. Appreciate the advanced knowledge.
Exactly. Appreciate you. Shout out to the real men who pay what they owe.
It can be done. You have to say the right things, not the wrong things. I think we helped lead Russia into that war by saying, well, if they took a small part of the country, that would be okay. Such a tragic waste of human life. When you look at all that's happening there, those cities are obliterated. First comes the tanks, and then come the nukes.
That's what he said. First the tanks, then the nukes. You ain't lying. But we got to know where the nukes are coming from, and the nukes are going to be coming from the Russian side. I truly do not believe that America is willing to go to nuclear war over Ukraine. I don't think any of the European states are willing to engage in nuclear war over Ukraine, and that's why I think that Putin would be wise to call their bluff. You need to call it now instead of exhausting yourself. So that's really goofy on Putin's part. Let's hear more about what Trump is about to say on this one.
This crazy war ended now. It can be done. And in fact, it's easy to get done. When I'm president, we will be a strong country again. People will never be playing these games like they've been doing to the United States of America. They don't respect us anymore. They respected us greatly 2.5 years ago. They don't respect us anymore. Thank you very much.
That boy got his tan on. For real. What's this, like an intermission?
In Ukraine is very dangerous, explosive, and escalating by the day. Joe Biden's weakness and incompetence has brought us to the brink of nuclear war. And now Biden is doing what he said 10 months ago would lead to World War III. He is sending in American tanks. It's far past the time for all parties involved to pursue a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine before this already horrific catastrophe spirals out of control and ends up leading indeed to
Matrix over here playing with my audio. Now that's a really good point that Trump just pointed out, which is that earlier Biden was stating that if they sent heavy arms or long range arms to Ukraine, then that would embolden the Russians to use greater force. And the truth is that they've done both things. They've sent heavy arms and they've sent long range arms. And I think that the only thing that they're figuring out as they inch, like take inches, is that they're figuring out that Putin's not as scary as they've portrayed him to be. And one thing that the American population needs to understand today is that the propaganda was clearly a lie. Because if Putin was the evil dictator and the mean dictator and the serious man that they've portrayed him to be, instead of somebody who's just pursuing his own power, if he was really like that ambitious dictator, he would already press that nuclear button. He's had every right to do that. And I want to also point out something to you. Historically, there was a sensible reason for America to try to contain the Soviet Union, because their concept was exporting revolution. So they wanted to export communist ideology to other countries, and obviously they grew the Soviet Union by gobbling up other countries. So they were exporting their ideology. They got it as close to us as Cuba. That was a communist country. They got it to other countries in Latin America, and it seemed to be spreading like wildfire. It was even in Angola and various countries in Africa. And so there was a reason to contain the Soviet Union, the Russians. But today they haven't been trying to export their ideology or their way of life. So there's no real threat there. So that's something that we need to consider and understand, that the nature of the Cold War enemy we had in Russia is no longer there. Now you look at China, they too were communists, and Russia exported communism to China. But today China operates strictly in a capitalist capacity. There's no ideology at all. Now, understandably, Muammar Gaddafi was definitely still on his revolutionary stuff, and he believed that America is a great imperialist nature, an evil force in the world. And at some levels is true, and at some levels is not true. And so you could put together a coherent argument as to why they wanted to take out a Gaddafi, but you cannot put together a coherent argument today as to why America is taking aggressive action in certain parts of the world.
Okay, Marcos just got on assassinbrand.com and got the holiday hustle day shirt.
Oh, word.
The tank top, yeah.
Okay, that's what Marcos like his tank tops.
Yeah.
Man is a
That's the second person today that got that during the live stream.
word.
Yeah.
That's a hot item. I guess they ready to actually get their work in. They saw your boy in the gym, hopped off that 20-hour flight and just went straight to the gym from the airport. You dig?
World War III. And this would be a war like no other war, because
That's
this
true.
would be a nuclear war. As I have said many times before, Russia's invasion of Ukraine would have never happened if I was in the White House. Not even thinkable, not even a possibility. We must end this ridiculous war and demand peace in Ukraine now before it gets worse. And believe it or not,
Is Trump mixed? His daddy black. His man then got his tan on.
It would be easy to do. It would be very easy to do. Is brewing. If I were president, the Russia-Ukraine war would be able to negotiate in things, not the wrong things. I think we helped lead Russia. Those cities are obliterated. It's easy.
That's weird. It seems like they have a repeat on the video. Now let's get back to the maps. You caught up?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's get back to these maps real quick. I want you guys to take a look at this. Is it showing the map?
Yeah.
Let me enlarge this for you guys. All right, so this is a map from the British Ministry of Defense. And again, they call it defense, but these are aggressive entities within the Western governments. These are not defense entities. These are very aggressive. So one thing we want to notice here is when you look at these strike locations, I think that, you know, the patterns and the timing of the strikes, it would have been nice if they'd kind of put like the date range of some of these strikes. Because as I said, my initial strategy would have been to strike along this Polish border, and also it's actually obscured here, but and along this Hungarian border. And we see that the Hungarian border hasn't really seen any action. Now, truth be told, there might not be any major towns here. Obviously, we have major towns along the Polish border, but I would have wanted to first, take an air offensive here. Use the Air Force and then use long range bombardment here, and then march ground troops in coming out of Belarus, really like sneak attack low-key. And that's how I would have cut off the weapon supply coming in from the Western states. I do like that we had some level of attack here, but it's not close enough to those borders to alert those nations. Then the other thing we want to consider is there's a nuclear power plant, and I think that was very strategic to take over that nuclear power plant by Russia. I think that was really smart on their end, and hopefully they're able to harness some of that. It would have been really foolish if the Ukrainians didn't disable that before they left or make it unusable. That's what I would have done, scorched earth policy. And then you see that there's been some attacks centered around Kiev, but in my opinion, I think that should have been the very first part that was attacked by the Russians was Kiev, with the very clear goal of murdering Zelensky. Now, Zelensky could have been taken out by individual operatives before the war started, but if you wanted to just basically hit the blitzkrieg on Ukraine, I would have hit them with long range bombardment of Kiev with the goal of taking out Zelensky. That would have been the first place I attacked. All of this area that you see in red, that's Russian controlled. I wouldn't have worried about any of that. Crimea is listed under this, and I think this is like really an effort by the Westerners to try to create more conflict, because Crimea shouldn't even be listed in red because it's already been a part of Russia. So it should actually be listed in this neutral color that Russia's already listed in. But anyways, they listed Crimea as well. And I think that's a part of that is an economic interest that the Westerners have. Controlling seaports and shipping lanes and all that stuff is helpful to the West and also helpful to the Western military powers. Ukraine's just a pawn in a greater war. Anyways, all this area that's red, I wouldn't have it red. If I was Russia, I would not have put ground troops there. I would have left that wide open and given the Ukrainians the opportunity to cross my borders with a spitball so that I could nuke Kiev. And then after that small nuke, I would have used one of the smaller nukes I could utilize. Then I would have basically annexed the whole of Ukraine because I would have then already went along that western flank and basically closed in on everything.
Okay, we have Devin sent a cash app. He said 3 hours of thoughtful analysis. Thank you, Saint.
I appreciate that. Shout out to the ones who appreciate the work. Appreciate you. And also shout out to the members at patreon.com/the Saint in the Center who support the work on a regular basis. We have a strong group of people who really rock with us. And those are the ones we care about. Here we go. Germany's fresh Putin flattery amid Ukraine war. Let's hear what the Germans have to say. I lost a lot of respect for the Germans. I love German history, fascinating history. When you go back through the the Kaisers and the Prussian military heritage, fascinating Russian history, tremendously talented people. And today it's like, man, they went left after Hitler.
Because we are fighting a war against Russia and not against each other.
Boy name is Olaf. I got a friend named Olaf. His middle name is Olaf. He's actually, his people are from Estonia.
We have Melvin just got on Man and Woman brand and got the Milky Way tie-dye.
Oh, shout out. That's what's up. That's the one you were talking about. Yeah, I actually got the what's that light colored one called? The light colored tie-dye. That's the one that
Like the light rainbow one?
yeah, the light rainbow one. Yeah, people mess with that one. I like the tie-dyes because it pops, it stands out. And that's what a player need to do. Foreign minister declared that Berlin is at war with Russia. Not a wise move. You're just declaring war unilaterally. I don't respect it. There's no way Russia or Germany can be at war with Russia without NATO being at war with Russia. So this person is literally lying. She needs to be fired, probably jailed too. Oh, he trying to clean it up now. Can somebody get him to shave them side pieces on his head? It's like, it just kills me. And you know what? Shout out to the black guys, excluding George Jefferson, because they know how to shave the sides of their head. You know, one thing my only complaint about the white man, and this is a historical complaint, this is not even the modern white man, is they have the nerve to have no hair up here, not a hair in sight. They got hella hair on the sides, and they just leave it there like it's cool. Off some George Burns stuff. You heard me? They think they George Burns. Ain't got no decency. Man, cut that hair off, man. Michael Jordan. Or who is Professor X on X-Men? Is that Professor X? Okay. Berlin denies being threatened by Putin. Nice. Russian President Vladimir Putin did not threaten either me or Germany. Okay, he said, except battle tanks for Kiev, all other things would be careless and extremely dangerous. Man, I want you guys to understand the deceitful nature of politicians. You are sending weapons of war to murder Russians, and you're acting like it's all good. There's a certain type of evil and wickedness in a human being when they can state things on record that are evil, deceitful, murderous, against their word, and hell, against prior agreements that were made between nations, and then try to hide their hand as though that they have good relations with Russia. This is really sad. And the sadder thing is that more people haven't joined the SAS. And I mean, we should have billions of people within the SAS, and because your leaders are lying to you and they don't value your lives. You see, here's what people don't understand. Once this war is over, Putin is going to still be alive. Once this war is over, the feminine chancellor of Germany is still going to be alive. Once this war is over, Joe Biden is still going to maybe be alive. But if he died, it was of natural causes. You heard me? His crackhead son is still going to be alive. But it's the everyday people who fight for country and for soil, and we utilize them like they're crash dummies. We treat them like they're fodder for cannon. Like we treat them with no regard. You know, imagine you come from a family, and you know your family comes from the military. You're a military family because you're patriotic. You know, you grew up. You know, your family's from fill in the blank: Tennessee, Kentucky, Michigan. Everybody white. America never been a bad place for you, right? So you're a patriot. You're a nationalist. You love your country. Your father was a military guy. Your father's father was in the Marines. Your father's father was in the aircraft. Your father's father's father was in the fill in the blank. You love the country. The country's been good to you. You've prospered. Maybe you're from Texas. You've prospered. and you want to protect this country, you want to protect the values, and then they send you to Syria, or they send you to Iraq, or they send you to Afghanistan, or they send you to Ukraine for what? And you come back maimed, missing limbs, facially disfigured. Your wife don't even want to look at you. Your facially disfigured face scares your children now. And you did that for American freedom? You didn't do that for American freedom, little buddy. You did that so that industrialists, Raytheon, what are those aircraft companies? Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all these guys can make money. That's why you did that. Caterpillar, they can make money rebuilding the places that the military destroys. It's a business circle. Yeah, the aircraft, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, the weapons companies, they go in, they destroy the place. Taxpayers buy the weapons from these companies. The American government sends the weapons in, and the American soldiers, we destroy the place. Then Caterpillar, American company, they go in and they rebuild the place. And then the cycle carries on. And in the process, you lose your life. You're a patriot, and you signed up to protect the homeland, America, except you never did that, because America hasn't been in a just war since World War II. So for the last half century, probably longer, we've just been spending our lives cheaply. And it's sad. It is. It really is sad. We are in revolutionary times. Let's see. Olaf, German chancellor, writes, we also have consensus with Ukrainian president that Western arms will not be used to attack the Russian territory. Now, just look at the kind of games we're playing right now. He's sending weapons, and he's saying we're still cool with Russia because we're not attacking the Russian land, but we're still fighting the Russians. So what is your true aim there, Germany? What's your goal there? What is the German interest? How does this benefit Germany? It just benefits their weapons industry. And the weapons industry is big money, and big money controls the politicians. Let's just say that's what it is, because that's what it is. It's big money. That's it. That's it. It doesn't. No German will have a better life because of the Ukrainian war. In fact, Germans have had a worse life. I was just talking to Germans while I was in South Africa, and they were talking about they got to cut back on energy usage during the winter. Why? Because of the Ukraine war. Come on now. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Funny how they show Putin's face as kind of weaponry, even though the Germans are the ones sitting in the weapon.
Yes, we have to do more to defend Ukraine. Yes, we have to do more also on tanks. But the most important and the crucial.
And another thing, if we're just being realistic, I don't want a person who couldn't win a fist fight involved in military affairs. It's just strange. It's just strange. You have a small woman who could not win a fist fight, who literally couldn't walk down a dark alley and defend herself against a homeless man who's malnourished and strung out on drugs. But she's defending the nation. Come on, bro. Like, she shouldn't even talk about wars. She probably couldn't even bust off a ooh-wop without it falling out of her hand. Like, she couldn't handle the recoil on a rifle. Like, what are we talking about here? It's ludicrous. It's like the world is upside down right now. This is just outrageous. Carrying on, because I want to hear this broad talk.
Those new developments in Ukraine. ABC's Mary Alice Parks joins us from the North Lawn. And Mary Alice, we're learning about some backdoor diplomacy to deter potential use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, Janae, good morning. The White House is, of course.
Wow, she had a black name, Janae. Let's look at her again. She is black. Janae. Is that a real hair, though?
Deter potential use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, Janae, good morning. The White House is, of course, watching all of these escalations and threats from Russia very closely. And yes, a U.S. official confirmed to ABC News that privately the White House has been sending messages to Moscow warning of the consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. And publicly, the president, too, has been calling out Russia for making nuclear threats and saying a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. Now, it is not clear exactly.
First off, why are they zooming in on this man's dentures? That's not even right, nor is that necessary. Moreover, Look, Putin's I'm trying not to curse. Putin's a bitch. I'm very underwhelmed with him right now. I want to see him push that button.
How the U.S. would respond in that scenario. Officials here telling us that right now they have not seen any reason to adjust the United States nuclear posture. And yesterday, I pushed the White House about those votes taking place in far eastern Ukraine. I asked what happens if after Russia does declare these regions now part of Russia. Could that put the U.S. in danger, given the U.S. has given billions of dollars in military support to Ukraine?
Billions.
Could Russia claim that American weapons are being fired into what they are now considering Russian territory in that scenario? And the White House press secretary.
Well, Saints, that's pretty much everything. Look, the summary is this. Putin needs to press that button. He needs to land that nuke on Kiev. It should be small, small little nuke, just a little slap in the head. And then after that, annex the whole of Ukraine, and then they can go to the negotiation table. He doesn't yield any ground. He's going to be a pariah in the international community for like maybe up to a decade, and then everything goes back to normal. That's what should happen for Putin if he wants his best outcome. For Biden, if he wants his best outcome, they need to continue bleeding Russia dry, but it's also going to bleed America dry at the same time. But they don't care about the American taxpayer anyways. Truth be told, the real enemy is China, and we're pretending that they're not the enemy, and that's why we continue to lose to them on the most important battlefields, which are actually mostly in Africa, which is resource rich and contains the critical resources that are needed for cellular phones, computers, self-driving cars, in fact, car software in general. And we're talking about things like coltan and other like major resources that you'll find in places like the Congo. And America is largely absent in that that underground warfare. So we're like ignoring China, which is indeed the elephant in the room, and that only signals to our weakness and our delusion. And the only American president to really mention China and talk about them accurately in the last 40 years is maybe I won't say 40, maybe I'll just say 25 years would be Trump. Saints, I'll give you a little bit of time sending your last.
You have that link that was sent via Cash
Oh,
App.
thank you. Yes, we're winding down. You can go ahead and start that for me.
Okay.
I'll give you a little bit of time to send in your last comments, questions as we wind down. And I am going to honor the Saint who sent in his link, and you forwarded that to me at Mark Whittington. Okay. You emailed it. Oh, you texted it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll pull it up from text. Let me pop this up. And while I'm pulling this up, I do also want to point out to you guys live that you should absolutely mark your calendars for. Got a couple of them, but this one is the debate with Rollo Tomasi and Dr. Phil. So that should be an interesting one. We're going to review that footage and talk through the game that was shared. So shout out to Rollo and the Red Pill folks. My understanding is that he originated that. So that looks like it's in about 2 hours. So if you haven't already clicked the notification bell, absolutely do that. Now let's check out what the Saints sent to us. We got a Black woman who might have her real hair. Shout out to her. This one's called Debate. Was the CPC Ukraine letter a mistake?
For an anti-war movement in the United States and America, except for on the right side of the aisle. It's been confirmed by the retraction of this letter.
No.
Until Vladimir Zelensky personally decides the war should be over, it's a blank check to Ukraine. People won't stand for that. People aren't standing for it, and people are going to the Republican.
I don't know what she's talking about. Vladimir Zelensky's a puppet. He doesn't have any control as to when the war ends. You see, so he wants the war to go on until he can defeat Russia, but he's not going to defeat Russia. So it'll just be a protracted war because Russia's not going to lose. So it's really going to end when either Russia hits them with a nuke or the United States and the Western powers basically withdraw their money. As soon as they withdraw their money and their weapons, Ukraine's done. So Zelensky has nothing to do with it. This is between two superpowers. And this chick is wearing one AirPod, like the corded ones. So I'm done with her.
party as a consequence.
Everybody understands that this war has to end in a negotiated settlement.
So why is it so controversial for people to say that in a letter?
That's what I'm getting at, because it's this method of doing it. This is in America's interest.
Shout out to the Saints supporting the work. Mamba's office writes, off topic, how did you meet Suge Knight? You mentioned that in this once in the past. A good question. And by the way, shout out to Suge Knight. I hope he's faring well behind the wall. Long story short, I was a LA kid, and there's a strange connection sometimes between gang culture and celebrity culture in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is inclusive of Hollywood, of course. So many of you may be too young, but there were two TV shows that were very popular, especially among African Americans. One was called The Parenthood. It was on Channel 13 UPN network. This was with I think Faison Love is now often on Vlad TV interviews. He's a fat black dude who played Big Worm in the movie Friday. He was also on Robert Townsend's show that he produced called The Parenthood. And the little boy Nicholas was a good friend of mine, and also another buddy of mine, Corey. And also there's a show called Moesha, which you probably have heard of. And I think that Moesha reruns on Netflix now. And Moesha was starred in by an R&B singer named Brandy, who was really popular back in the day. And the boy Miles on that show was a buddy of a friend. So long story short, B2K, which was an R&B group, they had a concert in Hollywood. I think it was at Universal City Walk, or it was near there. I forget exactly what the case was, because we showed up super late. But we pull up in Hollywood, you dig, like young boys. We like 15, 16, super lit, dripped out, pulling up in the latest BMW drop top, latest Mercedes, you heard me, all that cool stuff that you want to be in. We like 15, 16, rolling reasonably deep. And so we're leaving the B2K concert because we got there late. And it's me, the homie from my neighborhood, Miles, who's famous, and Kurt, who's famous. Now, Kurt was a childhood star, so people often don't recognize him. But Miles was a star when he was in his teen years, so he still looks the same. So we pull up to a red light in Hollywood, and we're just about to exit Universal Studios. And so the two cars, and they both like super flossy cars, and we're all very young. And then a car full of white girls pulls up next to us. And they're like, you're that guy from that show. You're that guy from that show. And then Miles turns and looks at us like, these bras. And the light turns green. He just peel off. Then we peel off, trying to catch him. And so we're smashing through Hollywood. If you ever driven through Hollywood, Cahuenga Boulevard and all that good stuff, has a lot of potholes. We go to this Denny's. I forget if it was a Denny's or an IHOP. I think it was an IHOP. So we go to this IHOP. And you guys, if you're from LA, you know what I'm talking about. It's in Hollywood. It's right across the street from an In-N-Out. In-N-Out's always packed. And in the middle of the night, the IHOP is always packed. So, we probably got there around like 3 a.m., something crazy, super late. The nightclubs are letting out. So it's just a bunch of people there. We go inside the IHOP. We're able to get seated relatively quickly, which is a shocker. And the homie Kurt, he had and this is back in the day too, he had a diamond tennis chain on. This is back in the day before people really did that. And he had it under his shirt. You could see it, but it was under his shirt. It wasn't out like that. And then, the homie Miles kind of had his stuff out. And so it's me, the homie from my neighborhood, Miles, and Kurt, and we're sitting at a booth, and we had just got our menus. And then all of a sudden, like 5 white girls walk in, and we're kind of like, and they come in and like sit at our booth, and we was like, are y'all the girls from the... They're like, yeah, we followed you guys over here. And my first thought was like, why? Like, number one, we didn't ask you to follow us. Number two, we were driving extremely fast and extremely recklessly through these Hollywood streets. Like, I don't even know how you caught up with us. That was crazy. Like, we drove through Hollywood Boulevard. We drove through tremendous traffic, and we're driving super fast. Like, I don't know how you kept up with us. But anyways, they came over and sat down. And, we're talking with the girls, and I already knew, like, I wasn't going to be able to function. Like, these chicks are here for big money, big fame. Back then, we didn't call it clout chasing because it wasn't like clout. It was actual fame. Like, these are real celebrities. These are people on television. This is not internet, like social media stuff. So then all of a sudden, we see a bunch of tall black guys come in. And we're kind of like, that's interesting. And you got to keep your eyes out in LA. LA is not a place to play games. You know, you don't want to get P&B rocked. You dig? So we keeping our eyes. It's like a bunch of tall black guys. They just keep coming in. We're kind of like, God damn, like we starting to think like, yeah, it might be time to dip. I don't like the way the scenery is looking. And then some dude comes over and he's like, oh, hey, what's up, man? Like you that little, and I'm not gonna say exactly what he said because I don't want to, get flagged too much. He's like, you that little N-word from the Parenthood. Oh, you that little N-word, you that little N-word from Moesha. And then he turned to the homie. He's like, well, what you do? And then the homie's like, oh, I rap. And he's like, well, what you do? And I was like, I don't do anything. He's like, nah, what you do? You ain't got to be all like, you ain't got to be all Hollywood like that. What you do? It's like nothing. Now, mind you, at the time, I think I had stopped going to high school. So I wasn't a student. I didn't have like a proper job. It's ready. I didn't have a proper job. And I was just hustling. So nothing to say. So long story short, he was like, yeah, well, this is Spider. This is Suge New Artist, which is like I think Spider was like a Crip, Spider Loke. It's like a Crip rapper, probably from like LA or he's from LA or Long Beach or something like that. He's like, yeah, Suge outside. Come say hi to Suge. And we're like, no, we don't want to say hi to Suge. Come meet Suge. We're like, no, we don't want to meet Suge. It's like, yeah, come meet Suge. And he walks over and then he reaches into Kurt's shirt. He's like, oh, nah, let that breathe, man. Let them diamonds breathe. And he sets Kurt's chain outside of his shirt. And let them diamonds breathe. And then he's like, come meet Suge. So basically strong arms us to go meet Suge. We go outside and we see a avalanche, like one of those avalanche trucks, and then like 50 dudes. Like there's a bunch of tall black dudes in the IHOP. We go outside. There's like 100 more rolling super deep, everybody oversized. And then they like basically just like escort us over to Suge. And then Miles shakes Suge's hand. Kurt shakes Suge's hand. And then I shook Suge's hand. And I just remember my hand just being dwarfed by his hand. Like, God, this dude is enormous. And he was a real boss, man. Like real boss. Big old pinky ring. You heard me? Big beard, bald head dude. He massive. Everybody around him massive. Man has a small army with him. You dig? Small army. And I'm just like, wow, like this is the way. Like he got all his crimies right here. Like all his goons is right here. Like he's the man. Like this is his thing. The police couldn't even arrest him right now if they wanted to. It's just not enough police. Like how many squad cars you gonna get out here to arrest this man? This man is running LA. Like, and he was the boogeyman. He's a real boss then. And there's some conversation and stuff that ensued after that. But that's the short answer of how I met Suge Knight. And shout out to Suge, real Damus respect him, real gangsters respect him. It's only the suckers and the Hollywood people that don't respect him. And the reason you got to respect Suge is because he said he was a gangster and he was always around gangsters and he was always doing gangster stuff. And every time I saw Suge, he was always around gangsters, like real active gang members. And I'm not saying that to aggrandize it. I'm just saying that in terms of like, he's actually what he portrayed himself as. And like, you can't really fault somebody for that. Whereas you got like people like Gunna who are snitching and they portray themselves as gangsters, or Tekashi Snitch 9, they portray themselves as gangsters. He was a man who was about what he said he was about. So you got to respect it. I'm gonna give you guys one more minute of this video that was sent over, and then I got a dip.
Promote these people and this struggle.
I'm sorry, when I see someone like Matt
I know you're making
flip-flop
an
the
assumption.
way that he has done.
No, that is absolutely not true. Can I ask you, have you talked to any Ukrainians about this?
Yes.
Then you go to the end of the letter and it says this is the primary aim of U.S. policy should be to end this war.
Should it not be? So let's take on this charge brought up midway and also at the end there that this is a letter that is urging a kind of colonial adventure.
I'll have to check out this letter, CPC Ukraine letter. Go ahead and send that link to me. That introduction, I don't know why they had background music on it. That was a bit weird to have background music on a political debate. That's kind of strange. But send me that. I'd like to read that for myself. The girl's voice is a bit high pitched. And this dude said, did you ask any Ukrainians? I just don't get the sense that she flew over to a war zone and asked people who are like in the war zone right now. But send that over to me. Saints, it's been a pleasure having this time to fellowship with you. Until next time.